All right. Good evening, and welcome to the September 17th meeting of the Issaquah Development Commission. This evening, we're going to have a meeting to address the Costco Development Agreement and the Master Site Plan Amendment to the Pickering Place. The meeting this is not a community conference per se, but we will nonetheless follow the general guidelines that we have in the community conference. I have, as some of you know that have not, that have been to the preceding two meetings, I have not been here, but I understand that we, among other things, have what we call a parking lot over here of issues that remain to be addressed that have been brought up in the past. So the way I proposed to do this is, again, as I said, to follow the general guidelines of the policies of the community conference, which means we will hear from staff first, then we will hear from the applicants, and then we will hear from any members of the public that would like to comment or seek clarification. And if there are members of the public that would like to do that, I'd ask that you come up here and sign the clipboard that's there. When you speak, go to the microphone and please begin by giving your name and your address for the record. Okay? And then after the public section, the members of the Development Commission will be able to individually seek clarification or ask questions of any of the previous presenters. And then when that's concluded, the members of the Commission will discuss and vote. Okay, we hope. That's the objective. I would ask that members of the public, we don't have a big crowd here tonight, but try to keep your comments to between 5 to 10 minutes, okay? All right, with that, Lucy?
I'm sorry, Randy?
I'm sorry.
Oh, you have the minutes.
We got minutes. We have minutes. We have the approval of the minutes, review and approval of the minutes from the September 3rd meeting. Are there any changes that need to be made? Are there any changes that need to be made or that want to be made? If not,
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the minutes of the September 3rd, 2014 meeting.
Second. Is there any discussion? Any further discussion? And then all in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Lucy?
Good evening, Commissioners. So my screen here looks like Vaseline got rubbed all over it. I'm hoping yours is clearer, but if I look a little squinty, you'll know why. I'm Lucy Sloman, Land Development Manager for Development Services Department. And I just wanted to explain the two sheets that were sitting at your place. The original staff report for the MSPA, the Master Site Plan Amendment, and for the land plan had conditions, and then those conditions have been edited through several briefing response memos, and I thought it might be easier if you had that sort of consolidated set of edits to look at when we get to the recommendation later on. I'll be covering some of these edits tonight. So the two-sided sheet is the development agreement, and the shorter one is the Master Site Plan Amendment conditions. And the Master Site Plan conditions are also conditions 6, 7, and 8 of the development agreement. So I think we've got belt and suspenders. So the plan for tonight, as the chairperson laid out, I'm going to go through some of the sort of more complex answers or edits to conditions in the second briefing response memo, and then we'll have a question and answer, comments from the public. Costco doesn't have a formal presentation tonight. They're happy to answer questions or participate in any way, but the briefing response memo was mainly information from the city, and so they don't have a separate presentation. And then our goal tonight, obviously, is to hopefully have a recommendation for council. So the first two pieces of the briefing response memo had to do with two of the conditions that came out of the Master Site Plan Amendment that were deemed confusing. Hey, Keith, could you do me a favor? I just realized none of their nameplates got up. They're right on the counter, I think. Oh, right there on the table, sorry.
I'll do that.
Thank you. We've got you nicely bracketed between Rick and Randy, but nobody in the middle. There was some concern that these condition 7 and condition 8 were not very clear, and so they've been rewritten. I won't read through them; they were in your memo. But I think the point is not only to clarify the intent, but to clarify that Costco has a limited role in both of these. They don't own Tract A, and therefore the handling of it is not at their sole discretion. They don't even maintain that tract. And the CC&Rs, they are just one of many parties to the CC&Rs. They would help facilitate certain things to as much as they can, as any owner can. But these were important. The staff felt that these were important conditions to be at least noted in kind of a carryover way from the original master site plan. Any questions?
The fertilizer one was the question I had because it talked about limited use, and I wasn't sure what that meant.
Of course.
And this is at least more expansive, but again, I'm not sure what it means when you say Costco shall not use hazardous toxic substances, pesticides, or certain fertilizers or herbicides. Is this, we had talked about accepted scientific principles, or is this good language that is used somewhere else?
So the intent was that the however phrase defined what certain fertilizers or herbicides could be used. So the fertilizers would be limited to organic slow release, and the herbicides would be those approved for use near aquatic environments for invasive plant removal or elimination or eradication.
Okay.
So it was in our critical area
See,
office.
I would leave out certain fertilizers or herbicides altogether and just say shall not use hazardous toxic substances or pesticides. However, organic slow release fertilizers and herbicides approved are okay.
Okay.
I think that makes it, at least in my mind, somewhat clear.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Another concern that was raised at our last meeting was Pickering Place Owners Association, and were they aware of the opportunity to participate in certain actions that were taking place with these various permits, and whether there was enough collaboration that had been going on between the city and the PPOA members. Since our last meeting, a letter has gone to each of the PPOA members identifying that there are certain actions that are happening with the development agreement, and if they apply or if they write us a letter, they can participate in joining in on those actions. We also met with all the PPOA members who chose to attend on Monday, and I think had a very productive conversation that identified several things that we're going to keep pursuing over the next couple of weeks. Okay.
Lucy?
Yep.
My recollection was that people could opt out of the master site plan if they submitted a letter prior to the approval of the development agreement. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so the plan is for that to be approved. I guess we're going to make a recommendation, and then the city council will make that approval. When is that expected to happen? If we were to move ahead.
The next meeting of the city council is October 6th.
Okay.
And if I can add something, because I think it's an important point that you've raised. So the development agreement is for Costco. The way we've worded the major amendment to the master site plan is it would allow for the removal of properties from Pickering Place. It's not specific to Costco, so we know that Costco wants to be removed from Pickering Place master site plan, but the way we've written it, it would allow for other property owners to be added into that group that gets kind of bundled together, if you will, when Costco is removed.
And Keith, are you referring to the resolution?
That's the way the resolution for the action that council will take has been worded.
But you say you had a great meeting. I'm curious. How many people actually showed up? I mean, what percent do you? I don't know how many owners there are. Maybe there's 6 owners and 2 of them showed up. Maybe there's 100 owners and 75 showed up.
I think there were 4 or 5 owners out of 13. So Costco obviously didn't show up. And one of those owners represents a number of other owners. He's the board representative. Some owners don't live in town, so they didn't attend. Oh, and the management company, thank you, I couldn't think of the term. The management company was there, so I'm hoping that's part of maintaining good communications.
Thank you.
So another issue that we talked about some was the concern about, are the buildings just related to the streets, and what's the relationship to the creeks, and making sure that we're consistent with Central Issaquah. And so in going back and studying it some more, and I'm just summarizing it here, there's more detail in the briefing response memo. The Central Issaquah standards have community spaces on the street side of buildings where the main pedestrian access is. But the standards also identify that the buildings need to recognize that the creek is present and that there are spaces or decks or other kinds of elements that are oriented to the creek. The land plan has the sort of pedestrian entry plazas on the street side, but they also show semi-private areas on the backside. Now, semi-private is not a defined term, but they have those existing kinds of spaces associated with their buildings. I've got some photos, which you may have seen in the memo. And also the existing buildings establish a sort of expectation of how the buildings will relate to those kinds of open spaces. So the first building, Building 1, which was built in 1990 and is located here, and this is the front of the building, and this is the pond side of the building. Although it had windows and a door and a sort of small terrace here, the ground floor was fairly walled off. This was a good way to screen equipment, but not necessarily a good way to build a relationship with the backside and the trail. And that building was not built for Costco. I think that's an important thing to say. The second building that was built in 1998, which I understand was built for Costco, this is, again, the front on the left and the pond side on the right. You can see kind of faintly in the plan here that there are 2 very sizable terraces on, basically along each of the wings. And in the central area where this kind of door is, there's a rather grand staircase that comes down from the terrace down to the trail. And then the third building, which is right here, this is the front. This was built in 2001, and then this is the back. So you can see here how much larger the terrace has gotten. The architecture is much more dynamic and kind of responsive and responding to the kind of uses that are there. And we think that this really has established a trend about, both in terms of how their architecture has evolved, but their understanding of the need to have a 4-sided building that is both has a strong presence on the street and has a response to the pond or the creek or whatever is located on the back because it could be either one. So I think from our perspective, we feel that that the existing situation and the imagery that they've provided establishes a sufficient expectation of the requirements to have both a front and a back. They may not be the same, but they both have a strong relationship with both the street and the more natural feature in the back.
I know that this phrase is not solely used by the city of Issaquah, but I don't really understand how something can be semi-private or semi-public, and frankly, it surprises me that that's still around, because I would have imagined that some lawyer sometime would have taken it to the courts and said, no, it's either public or private. So what is the objective of having something described as semi-private?
So I believe it's actually no, you're right, semi-private.
As I understand it, Lucy, there are some areas that have been in this copious amount of material that I've looked at that are designated as semi-public, and others that are designated as semi-private. And I personally don't know the difference.
I was just trying to read on my crazy little screen here. In terms of, for me, I have not done a search through Central Issaquah. I'm fairly certain it's not a defined term in the chapter.
Yeah.
So for me, it's about the way they're designed. Are they inviting other people? Are they inviting other people to come in? Are they just open? I don't know whether you can see, but there is a kind of low wall that raises the terrace here and here above, say, the trail that is adjacent. So there's a certain amount of visibility, there's a certain relationship, but it's vertically separate so that it doesn't just invite to the whole public in the way that, say, the amphitheater elsewhere, that might be an element that you're familiar with. The amphitheater is just, it's on the same level as the trail, it's very open, and it is available.
Yeah, I understand that is, again, that this is a general term. We had the commission, I asked the same question at, it's Atlas now, is it not? I asked the question there too, because it's the same concept. But I don't know, well, we don't need to hammer this, but to me it raises a question of enforceability or actual, if it begins to be a problem with homeless or whatever else, I don't know how you legally address access or presence in something like that.
Well, I think the piece that I would say from the city's perspective is that the space that is required as part of the, that is established as a specific square footage is the one on the street side.
Okay.
Now, both of these are located on private property. So I think that if a homeless person decided to camp on either of these spaces, they would be asked to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think, I think it's more of a design aspect than a ownership aspect, because they are both located on private property.
But members of the public just walking along with something that they bought a sunny day can go up there and sit down in that nice area there if they choose to? Well,
So you might want to ask Costco that question. I will say I took these pictures. No one said anything to me. I mean, I've wandered all through their campus. I think that they have generally been open to the public for people who are behaving respectfully.
Yeah. Again, this is not just for me. It's not just Costco. It's as I said, I brought it up with the other one. I just don't quite understand what the objective is, unless it is to give the property owner the ability to go out and say, "You've got to leave," or the police are going to be called up.
Well, I think if this, so let me try it this way, Randy. If those terraces on the back had no label on them, did not say semi-private, I would look at them and say, okay, this is the way they're responding to the standards that require a relationship to the creek. And these are on private property. And they, other than having some kind of relationship on that side, there isn't a requirement that that be public, that that be open. And so if it didn't have a big wide pathway, for instance, connecting the public trail to the terrace, I don't know that that would be a problem. I'm looking more at the elements relative to the standards than the label semi-private. I think in our early work, it was to try and help provide clarification during your review. It obviously didn't achieve that.
Well,
But I understand why you're asking. It's
Yeah.
like, what is it supposed to mean? What is it supposed to help us understand?
That's sufficient, thank you.
Sky bridges. We had a lot of discussion about sky bridges. One had to do with precedent. There'll be a little bit more. We've captured some of this discussion and some of the points from the memo in the development agreement. But I think that in terms of precedent, I think the important thing is balancing the pedestrian connections with a secure campus, especially one that is a series of buildings located on both sides of the road. So in terms of precedent, I'm not sure how many times this will happen, but the precedent is that we are still finding ways to provide frequent pedestrian connections and maintain a secure campus, which could be at odds, but which we feel has been appropriately balanced.
Question, Mr. Chairman. We talked quite a bit about the sky bridges, and there was a big concern about the view corridor. How many bridges are we talking about here, and at what level is it going to be at? It's going to be second, third, fourth? Or is it just one level going through? Has there been any thoughts about that?
So the view was the next piece I was going to touch on, but the map on the right here does show both the existing sky bridges, one's here and one is here, as well as the proposed ones. So over the right-of-way, there are two shown, but in response to the Commission's comments at the first meeting, Costco has reduced it from one sky bridge or to one sky bridge from two. They were originally, we had sent it forward with a recommendation for two sky bridges being allowed outright, and now there's just one, and they can come back and request further analysis to see if another sky bridge is appropriate. In terms of views, in looking at, in walking along the whole lake corridor and really, and there's more discussion of this, which will happen in a few minutes, but in looking at it, there are not a lot of views this is a wetland, so it's rather heavily forested. And so at this point here, there aren't really very many views, and most of them are over parking lots, which we'll talk about. The article that I linked to in the memo, part of the reason that I linked that is I thought that Mark Henshaw, who's Urban Design Director for LMN Architects in downtown Seattle, I thought made a good point, which is that unlike some things in which you're standing still and trying to look at the view, when a street is generally the kind of thing that you're moving along, you're walking, you're biking, you're driving, and so a sky bridge, especially with some of the parameters that we've put around the sky bridge about in terms of how wide and 70% transparent, et cetera, that it would have a momentary and relatively limited impact for whatever views were available at that point. In terms of your question, Ray, about how high it is, there is a certain required minimum clearance. I'm going to say with not utmost confidence it's probably at least 14 feet above the road. In terms of how many stories. To date, they have built single-story sky bridges. We have not discussed or proposed limitations on it having multiple stories in height. Although there is one of the examples, and I'll show you these in just a second. Well,
Yeah.
let's see. For instance, this one from Fred Hutch is 2 stories.
Yeah. I guess the question I was asking was, is it connecting on the 2nd floor, or is it connecting on the 3rd floor, or is it connecting on the 4th floor, or is it connecting 2 floors, and then we're talking about 10-story high building possibly. So are we going to have a set of crossing 2nd and 3rd, and then 8th and 9th maybe? So, so that's the question that I'm asking.
Right now, the way it's written, there is not, other than the clearances that would be required for the roadway, there are not specific limitations on how many stories that would be.
Mhm.
Now, I think my interpretation would be that we've allowed one that could be 2 stories. I don't think that if they put stacked ones at distinctly separate floors, that would count as one.
Ray, Lucy, I think what Ray's asking is, are they going to connect 2nd floor to 2nd floor, third floor to 3rd floor, or 4th floor to 4th floor? Is that?
Yeah.
No, and I do understand that. I just,
Don't know.
there's nothing right now
Right.
in the land plan or the
Right.
development agreement
Yeah,
that
yeah.
would, that answers
has to
that,
be 4th
that would
floor.
restrict them, that it had to be at the 2nd floor or that it had to be at the 8th floor.
Correct.
Um,
Correct. And that
So
was my question.
that's just the state is
Yeah,
in.
and that was my
language.
question, is it just one floor? Because all the pictures that we've seen and all indication are that it's a one floor, one bridge. But if we go to 10th floor and they said, well, we want to connect 10th to 10th, so you got 2 now, yet we're looking at just one sky bridge and not 2. And, it could be double stacked, and, the argument could be made that we're approved for one sky bridge, and 2 level, that's one sky bridge too. So I was just wanting to get a clarification on that. Thank you.
Yep. So there was also a question about design. I put the criteria that are in the development agreement currently in the memo, but just to summarize them, the sky bridge would be architecturally integrated, taking external design impacts into consideration. It would have a pleasant interior with, which is described. There are specific width and height requirements of the interior. It needs to be relatively level and square to the buildings, meaning perpendicular across, and to have transparent walls. Not going to make you read all of that on the screen. So those are just the sort of key points of the criteria. And finally, there were some design questions. There was a concern that the images that we had shown were too much glass boxes. These are the 4 images that were originally included in the staff report. So we did some additional research and had some additional discussions, and we added 2 pairs of images in the briefing response memo. These 2 images were added to give a sense of what architectural integration might mean. The image on the left is Western Washington University, and the image on the right is Costco's existing sky bridge between Building 1 and Building 3. This is the second one they built. And we thought these demonstrated a relationship of materials, of scale, of kind of openness, and just architectural character that were kind of illustrative guidelines of what architectural integration would be.
Another question, Mr. Chairman. So on the sky bridge, and maybe we're getting into the details, which I guess I'd like to maybe get an answer or response from you. Was there any indication on whether the bridge, the sky bridge, is not cantilevered, but there's no column in between? Or is there any limitation on the structure? The way it is now? And
So
where I'm-
the existing sky bridges, so you can see here, there's a pair of columns here, and I believe there's another pair here, so that it kind of frames the walkway that goes underneath. And over, and that's the way their other sky bridge is also built. In the examples we've shown, sometimes, like the one with Western Washington, you know, this is essentially a clear span. But you do see some of them. This is also from Western Washington, where they've used columns to create a sort of series of portals.
Yeah.
And likewise at Fred Hutchinson, using the columns to create a portal. Obviously, when you're dealing with the right-of-way, it is much less common and likely that there would be any supporting structure between the buildings, or certainly around the street, because it interferes with the sidewalk and the travel lanes. So I think it's somewhat, the answer depends on whether we're talking about ones crossing the right-of-way or ones that are over private property between the buildings.
But the way it's drawn out now is that you're connecting two buildings over public right-of-way.
There are
And-
some that do, this one, or this one, whichever one they choose to build first, those are over right-of-way.
So there's no...
This one, this
column-
one, this one, this one, and this one are over private property. And since there's not vehicular traffic moving under those, well, there would be maybe here, the rest of them are over pedestrian and plaza type areas, and so they might architecturally choose to use some kind of column structure as part of the design.
Yeah, well, I guess economics-wise, would probably be cheaper to have columns in there. But if we're trying to maintain the view corridor, you know, by putting more columns, you're just kind of limiting your view, and, you know, we're...
So I have some images that were also in the briefing response memo that show one of the existing corridors. So can we hold and look at that in a moment when we get to that part of the presentation? Because I think that may answer your question.
Okay. Put that down.
So the last pair of photos that we added to the briefing response memo were two images of possibilities or illustrative guidelines for sky bridges crossing the right-of-way. The one on the left is open air, meaning that although it has weather protection in the sense it's got a roof and side panels, it is not climate controlled. And then the image on the right is illustrative of a kind of how a sky bridge might be used to create a gateway into Costco campus or Pickering Place, for instance. So the proposed edits to condition number 3, essentially, because we've now added some additional information in the memo, are add that briefing response memo into the condition as one of the touch points for understanding how the sky bridge would be, what those illustrative guidelines. Okay. Another topic in which there was a lot of discussion was the Development Commission's role with future permits, the review of future permits. In thinking about responding to this, you know, we put some information in the memo. Last week, one of the council people at a committee meeting had asked that before the next committee meeting we lay out what the differences would be between a site development permit and the process that we were describing. And in thinking about this, these are the kinds of points that we were going through, so I thought that might be useful in our discussion with you. The things that would be similar between a standard site development permit like Atlas and a future Costco land use permit is that you would see a full submittal with a similar level of detail and information. We would use the same types and methods of notice. You would receive a staff report. The purpose of the meeting would be the same. Talk about issues, opportunities, inconsistencies, concerns, questions, and that the staff, just like we have with this process where we do the briefing response memo, we would prepare a response to each of the issues and inconsistencies that were raised. Differences, it seemed like there were 3 differences. The first is that that this meeting with the Development Commission and the public would happen earlier in the process rather than at the end of the review process, which is kind of like the way a community conference is. It happens earlier. It would be a public meeting and not a public hearing. And although the commission would be reviewing and inputting, they would not have a decision.
Point, it would be a recommendation to the council?
No, because it's a staff decision on those future land use
Okay,
permits.
so input is to you, not to the council.
Right.
Which is the difference with the community conference. A difference.
Well, a community conference, as I understand it, is really input to both the staff and the applicant
Yes.
for their future full submittal. So this would be input to the staff and applicant. And I think the important thing that we walked away from last meeting with the Development Commission was a concern, if we've identified inconsistencies, what are going to happen to them? So we have revised the development agreement text. You can see the underlined part that identifies that staff will shall prepare a response confirming or not the identified inconsistency, the basis for the response, and if an inconsistency exists, how it will be addressed in the decision. So it seemed like we wanted to be very clear that that input was not just for show, that input was to be taken seriously, and if there is an inconsistency that we need to address, exactly how that would be reflected in the decision that staff would be making.
Lucy, can you go back to the last slide?
Sure.
Please. Would you, on the record, I really think this would be helpful if we get this, would you define the difference between a public meeting and a public hearing?
Well, I'm not sure that the experience is any different. We're having to provide notice. We're taking testimony. People are signing up. There's a certain formality that comes with a public hearing. The record is the same.
I guess what I think especially members of the public need to understand is what is the distinction between a hearing and a meeting, and if there isn't one,
there's a level of, well, I'll tell
Would
you.
one of the differences be whether it's quasi-judicial or not?
Yes. Yes, that's why a public hearing is required, is because it's quasi-judicial, and you would have to publish it in the newspaper, and we wouldn't be publishing this in the newspaper, but we're thinking that we would use the same level of notice, which is, posting the site, putting it on our website, mailing out to adjacent property owners. So there's not an intent to have less notice.
But the point is that the public hearing is a quasi-judicial
Yes.
hearing that requires a bit more record keeping and a slight difference in process. But the point is it's a quasi-judicial, which meetings that are not can be addressed with a public meeting for input.
Yes.
Okay.
proposed edits. Any questions? Okay. Views. It would be a lot easier if we all went out and walked the site together. It's very hard to try and capture this in pictures. One of the things, that was apparent was that there are many spots along Lake Drive where you can see mountains and hillsides, but they're peekaboo. There's not really long, great vistas. Many of those views are over parking lots, over what are currently parking lots. In terms of street views, there's not much. For instance, I included this one simply because I think it's quite typical of the views down a street where it ends in a verdant area, landscape. And one of the places where you do have some view is at the very end of Lake Drive, where you can see to the mountain across I-90. And I just included this picture of 12th Avenue Northwest because it's always one of the things I think about when we talk about, mountains or hills at the end of streets, that when you have a very straight street like 12th Avenue Northwest, you really do see how the axial view works. And that with the curvilinear street, it's more of a challenge. So views, very important part of Central Issaquah, along with several other goals, increasing density, using land efficiently, being more pedestrian oriented, and significantly reducing surface parking. And in light of those goals, as well as the emphasis that the city makes on preserving and increasing the number of trees, in combination with the existing curvilinear street system, it makes it pretty challenging to have very many views in there. So that as we achieve the priorities of Central Issaquah in Pickering Place, a lot of the views are going to disappear because we're using those parking lots where we're currently getting views. Those are the building pads of these future buildings. Some views will remain. One of those is the one that I just mentioned. That's at the end of Lake Drive, which is this one. However, one of the things I noticed in looking out over these parking lots to the east and west is that that where we are requiring those pedestrian connections between Lake Drive and either the Pond Trail or Pickering Trail, that there will be opportunities to orient and site those trails to take advantage of the views that are existing right now. And Gesundheit. And then to get to Ray's question, one of the things that I was looking at more closely was the existing sky bridge between buildings 1 and 2. I wasn't really looking at it for the sky bridge. I was looking at it more for views and how they were framed in thinking about these pedestrian routes. And what you see is, so this is the same map I was using for all the rest of them. This is the orientation of the view, and these dots kind of represent each of these 5 pictures. That as you start out here, which is, maybe 50 feet away from the sky bridge, you can see under the sky bridge, but you don't really have a sense of the view. But even as close as here, you're already getting a sense of the treed hillside. Then when you're almost under the sky bridge, it opens up again. And then obviously once you're under the sky bridge and moving towards the pond, it really opens up. Now, so that one thing that indicates is how valuable the pond is in terms of maybe preserving access to views. But one thing we do have to keep in mind is that as Pickering Place redevelops and taller buildings are built, those views may be hopefully framed. For instance, there are certain corridors over here that are in between buildings, and so those may maintain certain view corridors across the pond.
On the third photograph,
On the third photograph there, Lucy?
Yes.
What percentage of glass is that sky bridge? Do you know?
I don't. My guess is that pedestrian bridge probably isn't 70%, but I haven't really studied it very
Okay.
closely.
Okay, yeah. All right, thank you.
And I would just note with a little irony that we had an excellent class this year on the law for all members of all the commissions and the boards. And one of the things that struck me in that was that we were advised not to visit properties before meetings, which I found and continue to find a little strange, but that was the advice that we got.
Right, and, I, just to touch on that, I think the concern is that it begins to tread on the line of, are you doing your own research separate from staff? If there was, just to let the commission know, if there was a situation in which we felt that visiting the site would be really important and successful, we could do that as a group. And that would be, and it would be a public meeting, and everyone could come along, and everyone could see the same things and hear the conversation and all of that. So it's not that those visits are out of bounds, it's just not on your own. But yes, it's hard when we're dealing with things like this. Would you like me to go to the next slide, Mel? Well, so right now, there is we've added a condition to recognize that these through block passages that we had conditioned under the land plan condition number 1 had this sort of opportunity to take advantage of the views and vistas that exist. And so the last sentence that's underlined there has been added to capture that, which says through block passages will be sited and oriented to take advantage of views and vistas of treed hillsides and mountains as envisioned by CIDDS, acknowledging proposed building placement and size as shown in the land plan. So the intent of that is that the buildings as shown are being recommended by staff as meeting the requirements of Central Issaquah, but that these pathways, these east-west pathways that are being required would be the opportunity to maintain access to views as much as we can. And east-west is where we're seeing most of the opportunities right now. Do you want to?
You want me to do it?
Yeah. Well, would you like to start? I'm happy to start. It's really up to you.
Your choice.
Okay. Why don't you go first? I think you should be able to say it in your own words, not have.
Well, this is something I put together because the photos there was one view that I didn't think was captured well enough. And I thought the staff did a great job providing lots of viewpoints for us to look at. But in the upper left corner is the arrow looking down is where the view is down below on the left side. So that's a view of Squawk Mountain looking south at about where the corner of the trade building is right now. And I think about the location where that sky bridge would be.
So you were standing about here. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Although if you were you at the south end or the north end of the trade building?
South end.
Okay. Yeah, that would be about right.
About where that crosswalk is. So just as background again, I served on the Central Issaquah Plan Task Force, and through all the meetings we had, one of the most important things was not losing views of the Issaquah Alps. A big change we made in the CIDDS or in the plan was to allow much taller buildings. One of the concerns people had was, will this block views? Part of the idea was we'll do whatever we can to preserve views. And I felt, as I mentioned last meeting, a concern about the east end of, or the south west end of Building 4, extending into the view corridor to Squawk Mountain, where Lucy's showing what was there. What I would like
You
to
can sort of
propose
see it over here.
is that remove that southeast corner of Building 4, southwest corner of Building 4, to preserve that view corridor, open up, and in exchange expand the east side of Building 5 to make it curvilinear with the street, to make up for spaces. We would lose a pedestrian plaza at Building 5, but we would gain a larger pedestrian plaza at Building 4 and maintain the views of Squawk Mountain. One of the few places where we would, I think, be able to maintain a good view of one of Issaquah's treasures.
So Mel was kind enough to send this to me this afternoon, so I had an opportunity to speak with him and to put this slide together and think about some of the points that he was raising. One of the points, one of the challenges we've faced in having this discussion is that the Central Issaquah standards say that you shall provide building 60 feet back from an intersection. So part of the reason that we had highlighted this corner was, or this little box addition here, was that, you know, the standards would say 60 feet back from this point, we should be providing street wall. In thinking about the, well, so that's a shall, and one of the other realizations was that as I provided the primary standard around views and vistas, it's a should. So there's this sort of potentially different prioritization that the code has. And in talking with Mel, that was inconsistent with his memory and is the way the code was written. But in thinking about that, it seemed that one of the things that the photo in the lower left illustrated was, you know, these trees are probably 30 or 35 feet tall, and that in terms of providing street wall, if this addition was, say, 1 or 2 stories tall, it might be 24 feet tall and would be no higher than the trees. And that, you know, trees keep growing, so even at 24 feet, it's not that much. So you could potentially imagine this little box here, you know, potentially extending out like this, and you're still seeing over it to the mountain beyond. And you get a sense of that. The reason the lower right-hand photo is here is that this was one of the photos I took as I walked along Lake Drive, and you can see that this is a 3-story building with a hipped roof, and above that is, you can still see the mountains. So that if it was only a 2-story building, you get a sense of how much you still might see over that building. And so you would meet both the priority to access the views and the requirement to have buildings right at the street corner.
Just a initial reaction to Mel's proposal. I think that's a pretty good idea. You know, as you're driving south on Lake Drive, you pass the Sky Bridge, if there's a Sky Bridge, and which I'm hoping that the glass area would be increased rather than just 70%, you know, would increase it to 80 or 90%. And you drive through south, past the Sky Bridge, and then you open up yourself into this intersection with no buildings in there, and you see Squawk Mountain. I think that's a good idea. And then in return, you have that, we're losing that, the building 5 expanding to the street.
Well, I think the challenge with that is that there is a requirement that the community space be located along the street. And so...
Along the street?
Yeah, flop and twist the, instead of doing what you did, just flop and twist it up into where they...
Let me see if we can
Yeah.
if, with the commission's approval, we're going to have the opportunity to make recommendations later. This section is probably more productively used if we just get clarifications and hold our recommendations until later. So if is that all right? I mean, this is
Sure.
this is a presentation. I don't view
Right.
that as a recommendation, but this is different from this needs to be. We need to be aware of this now, but we'll have the opportunity later collectively to make our recommendations and
You bet.
findings.
And one thing I will add, that one thing that came up was the idea that part of the issue here is where the street curves to the southwest, you lose that opportunity. If Lake Drive continued straight south and connected in and teed in at a 90-degree angle to the street, and so that your roundabout was at a 90-degree angle on both sides, you would preserve that view of Squaw Mountain and could still bring the buildings up to the street corner and still have the view of Squaw Mountain. So that may be another possibility to address it.
Mel, is that, and maybe this is general, is the roundabout going to be moved?
There is no roundabout there now.
Or is that, okay. that's
So
proposed?
this roundabout that's shown here, I know it's
Yeah.
grayed back, which generally on everything else means that it's existing, but this isn't part, I think the reason that it was shown that way is it's not part of Costco's construction plan, it's a part of the MTFA.
Oh,
So
okay.
the city would be building that.
Okay.
So it doesn't exist now. It's an intriguing idea that Mel brings up. There are some challenges with that, and, we can talk about those later when we get into discussing recommendations or considerations. I think that's the end of my presentation, unless there's anything else.
On the, in the handout, there was a 7 traffic mitigation cost, future trips, that you didn't talk about.
Some of those seemed really straightforward to me, so if it doesn't seem straightforward to you, I'm happy to talk my way through it.
The only question I had was when I read it, I didn't know if it was a little confusing to me. Is a recent change to project limits and Costco's commitment to increase the cap on their participation to $51 million.
Yep. So,
Then it says Costco is committing to pay 48% of the $51 million. And it,
Their share of the 51 million.
so,
the first thing says it was going to increase their participation to $51 million. Sounded like they were going to
So,
double their amount of money.
let me,
And we would be happy with that.
so,
It may just be the way it's worded in this comment.
no, it's not. And, you're paying a lot of attention, Carl. So that's good. Originally, the MTFA not only provided this crossing to the roundabout, and then it covered about to here. And you can see that in that sort of, the way the roads are shown, that's shown a little darker. In discussing with Costco as, how it would work and how the improvements would be phased in and what happens where you have existing buildings and there are no changes being built, how do the bike lanes and all the other different street elements of the street section that aren't currently present, how would they be built? It was, in those discussions, it was determined that the MTFA will actually go all the way up here to 10th. And all of this would be built at one time. So obviously there's an increased cost to that. So the project scope, the length, and the total amount increased. The percentages didn't change, but the amounts that both the city and Costco are putting into it went up because the project scope went up.
I'm going to let it go because I'm confused.
Lucy, I think what he's referring to is that the text actually says Costco's commitment to increase the cap on their participation to $51 million. But they're not committing to 51 million, correct?
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Actually, I had some other questions on things that have not been brought up in the parking lot, but what I'd like to do is wait until the public, if there are any members of the public that wish to speak, give them the opportunity to do so, and then if my questions are not addressed, we'll bring it up in the individual rounds.
Sure.
So if there are any further, I do have one request. Mel, would you go over once more what you're suggesting, just so I get a better understanding of it? I'm still trying to catch up here. So could I ask you to do that, please?
Sure. So I think two options. One would be in the upper left-hand corner would be pulling back the southwest, I wrote southeast there, but it's southwest corner of Building 4, and in exchange expanding the east side of Building 5 to make it curvilinear as Building 6 is, as shown in the center, to make it, bring that street wall up to the sidewalk, and in essence create a larger pedestrian plaza at the corner of Building 4. Now, if they wanted to take that Building 4 area and move it over to there, that would make sense as well. But the main purpose being to open up the view of Squaw Mountain. Another possibility is if Lake Drive could be made north-south there at that point, instead of curving, then you could bring the buildings up and still maintain that same view of Squaw Mountain.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other clarifications sought at this point by members of the commission? If not, we will open the meeting to any member of the public. And again, the applicant has no desire to address anything at this point. All right, fine. Are there members of the public that wish to speak?
Good evening, David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. Almost all the pictures, basically, of views have been with deciduous trees in full leaf. So there are some different views at potential. This summer, I led kind of joined in with some PE teachers that were offering summer classes for high school students because of the jam schedules a lot of high school kids have, and we were up on Squawk. And we went across the whole, we did 11.5 miles on Squawk, but I said, you know, when you're at Costco, next time you're at Costco, look up at Squawk and you'll see where we went, Central Peak, West Peak, and all of that, and you should remember this 11.5 mile adventure. So that view of Squawk is pretty special, and will become more special as that mountain is discovered. When we went through the Central Issaquah plan process, there were a few things to buy off the public and sell the whole concept, because people were very skeptical about adding this much of population, this much retail, this much office, the whole bit. How was it going to work? Well, there was going to be work. People were going to work, they were going to play, they were going to shop, they were going to live in Central Issaquah plan. And we're diverting off that quite a bit with this Costco proposal in terms of the live part. Yes, there was some shopping. The play aspect really gets to me is that the Costco site is a major corridor, especially over time, to the state park. If you're in downtown Issaquah here, yeah, if you want to go to the boat launch, you'll take the East Lake Sammamish Trail and be a noisy trail along major roads the whole way, practically. If you're interested in going to the rest of the park, yeah, you can go around the west end at 900, or you have this corridor, the Pickering Trail, part of the East Lake Sammamish Trail where it's quieter than the Pickering Trail, and then you get to underneath the bridge which hopefully will deal with the odors, and you can be right there at the state park. And so that's a major corridor through the Costco area for people going there, especially when we get lifeguards at the state park and some of those other improvements. We will see more movement of people, hopefully by foot and by bike, to the state park. And we need to make sure that that works through the Costco area. I guess those are the main aspects of where I'm going on this, but we're doing a lot. We got to just look at that site as how it fits into the whole central Issaquah area, and it's an important part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else?
Hi again, y'all. My name's Connie Marsh. I have a store at 1175 Northwest Gilman Boulevard and also live in town on Squawk, which looks great from a distance, doesn't it? So it's fun to listen to Development Commission have suggestions. It's not so fun to listen to staff push back all the time. And so you guys have put in a lot of comments and you've gotten a lot of no's. And one of the few things Development Commission has is the ability to approve and not approve. And that's actually a huge thing when you're looking at a staff wanting to make changes for you. Because if they don't have to and it makes life easier, it's much harder to make changes because they've always put a lot of time and energy into it. It's sort of the natural human state. So I would be really reluctant to give up the teeny tiny review process that you have left in the central Issaquah area because you had so much, and then the central Issaquah plan area gave you only enormous buildings to review, and this is even taking that away, even while Costco doesn't have to adhere to the central Issaquah plan in many ways. And it just seems incautious to let them have this for 30 years with so little review when it is a plan that we have never even used before. And I just think I think you need to say no. I realize they're trying to make you feel like they will listen and they will change things. I just don't think it's within human nature to have it be the same. I also know, having gone to community conferences, that it's never a complete thing. There's always things left out, and I don't really understand how it can be early, yet the same full submittal without the staff already being invested in what they're proposing. So that's probably enough about that. Lack of connection to the state park. Did you get my video? Okay. I made a video and asked for it to be sent to you before tonight's meeting. Guess you didn't get it. It is unclear how the common spaces are going to continue into the future from the Pickering Master Site Plan, because those are things like the amphitheater. I think they discussed track day and I think they discussed the stormwater pond, but there's other little common space areas in there that actually create some of the amenities that Costco will use and we've discussed and they've shown pictures of, but there's no real understanding or criteria that those must remain when and if they dissolve the CC&Rs or change the CC&Rs. And so I'm a little reluctant to say that the CC&Rs can be changed without some idea of what must remain. And the city has just said they need to approve. They don't say what they need to agree with. I think that needs criteria. I already went through that. Okay. The PED connections. I went and walked. And my understanding is this isn't quasi-judicial, so you could go and walk because this is a legislative action, but maybe I'm wrong. PED connections in the CIP actually say 250 feet. And nowhere does it say that the 250 feet can be met by going through a private building, because all of these PED connections are part of the Green Necklace, which is a very public grid that was overlaid on the central Issaquah plan to ensure that this is a public benefit even with the growth. So having looked for shalls and shoulds and looked through the entire construct of that, I don't see where going through their private buildings is actually allowed, and B, should be allowed, because they do get some flexibility to do what you want them to, no matter what the tier structure is. Now, it also says that the pedestrian grid is supposed to be friendly, and so in all of this, I never saw how we were getting across the street, because it's not easy to get from the Costco store over to the other side of the road. As we all know, if you've ever been to Pickering Barn and tried to go to Costco, it's really hard to get across Southeast 56, which is supposed to be a pedestrian linkage across. That's supposed to be part of the Central Issaquah Plan. I don't understand how pedestrians are going to be using that. I am not clear how they're going to be getting across from Darst Park, ducking under the roundabout and going north on the Pickering Trail in a way that feels safe and friendly, because they seem to be having to go underneath the roadway, which is, again, a dark bridgey type of an area. So I don't feel, again, the joy of the pedestrian connections. You need short, beautiful grid system, and you do need the views. And one thing they haven't talked about is part of the view corridor, from my understanding, is that when you're in the buildings, even 4 floors up, you should be trying to protect the best possible views for all of the buildings, which make your buildings better for the people who are in the buildings and their resale value, blah, 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 just to pay attention to it. Okay, one last thing about administrative adjustments in the Central Issaquah Plan. There's a lot of ways to do that in the CIP, but the staff does need to go through an argument of how this is in keeping or better than the Central Issaquah Plan guidelines. That's really loose. But when you see shalls and shoulds, and then you look at the vision statements, and they're all a little contradictory, there are tools in there to change all of those things. So I would hesitate in letting anyone tell you that one is strictly above another because there is a shall. If the vision language guides it, you can probably make the argument that it is possible. You guys should have gotten 2 different very long, excruciating emails from me and a video. So one last thing, I know I'm going on endlessly. You don't have the last draft of the development agreement, and so they're asking you to make a vote as if this is a near final draft or something like that. They're expecting a next draft to come out after this vote is already taken, saying that you have reviewed and are pushing this forward. But you haven't even seen what they know to be is going to be the next draft, which is unlikely to even be the final draft. So I would also hesitate in saying that you approve of anything that you haven't read yet. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Jim Severs, and I'm the owner of Pickering Square. I represent 13 retailers out of the 24, including Costco and all of PPOA, Pickering Place Owners Association. Myself and Lowe's represent 2 permanent board seats on the PPOA, and the other board seat, other than Costco, is represented by what is known as the lower retail, which is all the other 50% of the retail, other than me and Lowe's, is all the guys down by the theater, big lots. You're all familiar with that area. So that group is the lower retail. And they're represented by Greg, who is here. Now, let me give you a couple little facts. There are 24 retail operations in Pickering Place, including Costco's retail store. Costco has, in that, 13 of them, half of them, over half, or little and small big tenants in my center. And the office part of this whole thing, of PPOA, is actually a rather small part, but it's going to be the greatest impact of all, with millions of square feet possibly going up. Pickering Place was designed to be a friendly, environmentally well-conceived deal. It's one of the most iconic shopping areas in the state of Washington. Find me a better place that looks as nice with trees, waterways, public access. You won't find it. Now, I represent myself and my 13 owners who I've talked, or rent tenants, and I've talked to all of them. And we're very much in agreement, all the way from PCC to our smallest restaurant. We have the biggest concern, and I think it was expressed at the staff's invitation, which we appreciate very much, Lucy, and I think it was a productive meeting. There's potential of 12 people that could have showed up. We had 5. And I think it came away, Lucy didn't really tell you what I think the real, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the biggest thing was about parking, parking, and parking. Park where you shop, park where you work. Stay off of your neighbor's parking, because there is no public parking, and design responsibly where you can keep those employees where they're not tempted to walk across the street and go onto the Red Robin near Lowe's. Lowe's this week has brand new signs up, and I've talked to Lowe's this week. They got brand new signs up, and it specifically says no Costco corporate parking. The signs are still over in the other areas, even with the new parking garage. Now, we all agreed, all of us agreed, to have that critical wetland area removed because it was going to create Costco more parking, which they needed, because they were all over us. Most of us were not aware that they planned to build a remote parking garage further away than our parking lots, with people still parking. We've got security cameras up showing Costco people, and Costco's tried very hard. We got a written agreement that they would patrol employees parking on other people's property, because that was not their policy. And only about 3 or 4 weeks ago, according to them, they changed their policy where you were allowed to park on site, because you were forbidden before. But is this convenience of the approval? We don't know. But they have tried to monitor and run people off. But you know, it's like holding water upstream. You either contain it at the dam at the source, because once it gets down the river, you're not going to control it. And people will park where it's most convenient. Costco has the approval, I believe, of me and most of the other owners in there, and I'm not speaking for them, that we would like them to build their corporate headquarters. We'd love it. We also really appreciate what you guys have done, and staff, in developing a future plan for the city. We think, I think, and I've got years of experience in development, I think your vision for the city is quite good. It's going to be a lot of work to implement it, and you guys have got a big job watching all the details and not taking too big of a hurry, and keeping your authority all the way through. I think the problem with Costco is they're trying to get it done cheap and at a discount. They're trying to build a parking garage, and if any of you have seen it, the one they did, and if we'd ever run it through our Architectural Control Committee, which doesn't really exist. On paper it exists with 3 Costco people on it, but it had to be appointed by the board. The board hasn't met in 12 years, because normally we do everything in an annual meeting, approve the grass cutting and all that stuff. And I know because I'm a board member. And the other 2 board members, Lowe's and Greg, who runs the lower retail, says we have never been to a board meeting, so we don't think there's an architectural review even inside of our own deal. So that garage they got right now never passed muster. It would have never passed. It looks like Costco shelving inside one of their warehouses. Fortunately, it's surrounded by a lot of trees. Now, if this is their plan to remote park farther away than where people are working and shopping, and my parking lot's across the street, it's never going to work. We believe that with a good architect and good design, working with staff, they can generate that parking, like structural parking, not down the way, but at their retail store, like they do in other locations, anywhere from Iowa to San Francisco to other places. And Costco's had a notorious problem because they generate wonderful traffic and customers. People spend a long time in the store because that's how I spend a fortune at that store every year. You know, I mean, I love the store. But the problem is it can cause problems. And it can be solved if they generate that parking on site for the retail and they responsibly put their parking at the office locations. There are three things that still have to happen for Costco to get their dream. One is your city approval, which you're going through. And I think staff has been thorough, Costco's been vague, and you guys have asked a lot of good questions, but you really haven't got all the answers. And you're being asked to leave your authority off in the wind and really not be able to have the last detail on everything. But that's only one part of the process. The city and Costco, and we have legal opinions now, cannot make an agreement just with Costco. The city made a contract with PPOA, which Costco is only half of. And you can't cut a deal with them and cut us out. You have to make a deal where we decide inside of PPOA that we agree. And I think if we are made part of the process, we can make that happen. But we will stop the cities signing an agreement with Costco on the basis unless you receive an agreement with our corporation, PPOA. That's just one thing. Inside of our CC&Rs, there are many different provisions. One of them, for the kind of thing they're doing, almost any single owner can cause a veto. Then there's other provisions with a less stringent a vote, more strict vote rather, that can stop Costco in height and other uses. So it's kind of okay. They run you through the process, and they've got a general deal with you and the council. But now they got to get started with us. They only showed us stuff just a few weeks ago with a meeting they invite us to. They've been having meetings and detailed meetings with the city. Well, maybe that's all right, so they know where you stand. Now they got to come talk to us. And Lucy heard it at the staff meeting they called. And again, we do appreciate that because we've never been asked to talk to staff. I mean, we've never had our own little meeting. And I think the biggest thing you heard was parking, 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 and do not violate your neighbor. If you go parking your car when you get home on your neighbor's property, I guess you get upset. Or if he parks his RV or his trailer or his excess things or all of his guests over in your lot, you're going to be upset. My retailers, if they don't have good parking, and we've always had great abundance of parking, they don't have a business. You shop there at PCC or a Home Depot, Office Depot, sorry, and also the restaurants because you can always get a parking space. But if you can't because it's full of Costco employees, not even customers, their business is dead. It's just common logic. So they're going to have to convince the rest of us at PPOA that they can solve it, and we want to see specific architecture, which we've never seen. We're just getting little glimpses of very broad pictures. Some of you have even suggested, well, gee, this is kind of, what does it really mean? Where are the garages? How many people are you going to play? How many people are you going to stack in here? That hasn't been answered. They're asking for a broad brush, and then they want to control a development agreement. And the other thing that happened at the meeting, and Lucy can tell me if I'm wrong, everyone know what the rush was. We're just kind of really being informed of this, and we need to study it hard. We want to understand. Now, there are also some counter proposals going out here that can make this happen very fast. I, on my property, would love to de-annex out of the PPOA. With Costco, me, and Lowe's, we can leave like that. I can just be part of the city. I'm next to the Holiday Inn, Tully's, and you guys at City Hall. we could take our common area, by the way, half of the common area is in Track A, which is the most iconic, important area in the whole thing of Issaquah, because it borders the creek, goes from the highway up to the park. That's half of the common area. Well, if all of us in the lower retail, Lowe's and me, said, hey, Costco, you just do your own thing. You can have your common area around your pond, and you and the city fight it out. Go to all public streets, and the rest of us will give you the parkway or even put up a trust fund to help clear the path out. Because we also don't get to use that, our own common area around Costco like we would in our customers. We, regular retailers, love the public crawling all over us. We don't have membership cards to get into PCC or into Office Depot or restaurants. And we like people flowing around. We want the public to flow over the whole thing. In fact, we've even proposed, some of us, to getting rid of our PPOA altogether. Dedicate the main streets already built, all the common area around the pond, and all of that track to city public property. Then you don't have to worry about circulation because the city owns it. Now maybe the city doesn't want some of the burden of the pond maintenance, but it's a retention pond district, and we could contribute something every year into a park fund or put a taxation on us to do it. The Issaquah Creek Trail, Track A, there's no maintenance set. You're not even supposed to go off the brush. It's a clean trail, and it ought to belong to the public right now, because the way it's set up, technically, it is private land. They could restrict the hours or whatever, and it shouldn't be that way. It's the most important connection, as some of you pointed out, to the park, back to downtown. Now, I can understand why Costco wants absolute control around that pond, because what they give you or tell you is part of their neat open space for their campus is really semi-public, semi-private. That discussion came up earlier. Well, it ought to be just open to the public, period. Well, that's kind of up next to their office, and maybe with their kind of security, they need that. Well, maybe they can keep their part of the common area around that, cut a deal with the city, but for the rest of us, what's wrong with Track A just going to the city? That should not be restricted at all. And the roads that cross the last connectors, because the city already has some down, should just go to the public too. We don't really need an architectural review at PPOA. We've got the city. Because what Costco didn't do with their parking garage, because if we didn't like it, we only needed 75% vote of the remaining half to defeat them starting construction on it. It got put up, we didn't notice it. It's not going to happen again. We don't want to do that. We'll let you decide. On my property, if I over time build apartments, which are restricted in our CC&Rs, there's no housing allowed on this site. So you talk about your plan having balance of housing, retail, and jobs. Costco in most cities be required to be putting low-cost housing or some housing element with all that. And if you think you're going to rely on the other side doing it, which a lot of owners over there would like to do, as Lucy and the planning staff knows, we've already investigated. As my leases come up, we've already talked to tenants how we could rebuild, do residential, then our retail that we've got on the bottom, but we've got to contain all the parking in that building. You know, we're not shifting it off to a remote site. It's very expensive to do that, to make it look good. And Costco's getting by on the cheap. You can just put up a regular stacked cart, you know, like a park and ride lot, and not have any housing or offices above it, because that requires a very expensive structure, life, safety, fire. If you just have cars, it's easy, and then you make your people walk. But they'll walk onto our lots, not go to that. So just in kind of recapping, I can assure you that the development agreement that we have with the city, we think PPOA has lived up to the commitment made years ago to the city and built a pretty damn good-looking project, better than anything that you can find anywhere. It can be improved, and it can be intensified. We applaud Costco for wanting to stay in Issaquah, but you know what? They're not going to destroy the other businesses in there. And they've got to come to us, which they haven't. They thought it was easy because when we did the wetland, we thought they were solving a problem. They didn't. They put the parking garage and they'd still people come off of it. So now, too many times burned. If we have to stay as a PPOA with our CCNRs, we're going to hold the city to the fire on the development agreement we got. They can always be amending it, with certain things, like allowing Costco to put their next building in. But there's certain things in that agreement we like. Some of my tenants signed up for 40 years of leasing, well before the 12 years I've owned it. All right, I'll go. You're nice. You let me go more than 5 minutes. That guy was tough on me.
Yeah.
So I'll quit. I think you've got the idea.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I think at this point, we will go back to the commission, and if there are further clarifications that are desired by individual commissioners, we can certainly seek them. If not, then I think we can go understanding that if you have a remaining request for clarification, you can do it. But if not, let's just go right straight to the observations before we get to the last step.
Mr. Chair, I've got one question.
Sure.
When the buildings is going to be built, 400,000 square foot building, do fees still go to the city for parks, police, those kind of things? And partly this comes from thinking about extending trails, where money might come from for doing that down
Yes,
the road.
there would be impact fees. Yes, impact fees would be paid.
Okay. And those kind of fees could be used for something like extending trails?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I actually would like to get as succinct as you could make it, but I'd like to, because obviously all through this material that I've reviewed on my return, there have been frequent questions about the timeline and about the compressed, what is perceived by many people, including the gentleman who just spoke, as being a compressed timeline and not understanding why it has to be done that way. So if you can address that, I think it would be helpful.
Sure.
Good evening, Development Commission. Keith Niven, your Economic Development Director. So with all deference to Mr. Sievers, he knows why the rush, because we talked about it very specifically at our meeting. The city is guilty. We are pushing the timeline. And the reason for that is, and if our Public Works Director was here, he'd be the one telling you why this is so important. So the crux of this development agreement, we've gotten into a lot of conversation about land use, and that's all good and fine. But the real pinnacle of this development agreement is a partnership for building roads. And Costco, as you've heard, they are putting forward, I'm just going to use gross numbers, so don't count me down to the penny. So they're putting in roughly $25 million, and in return for that, they want to make sure they can build out 1.5 million square feet. The city has committed itself to pay the other half of that road project cost. And the way that we want to do that is we want to do that in as smart a way as we can, which means uses somebody else's money. And so really what's happening is the city's already received some money. We received $5 million from the Department of Commerce last year that will be put towards the city's portion of the cost of this project. We received another $3 million, which is being put towards the cost of the East Lake Sammamish portion of the project. And the Public Works Director has already made an application to the Transportation Improvement Board to get another approximately $10 million. So all of those things are in process, and the reason why the timing is so important is because the TIB has asked the city to basically prove that this project is real. Transportation Improvement Board, which I just said. You know, the best way that we can prove that this project is real is to have the development agreement done. Because that shows the TIB that the council is on board and has agreed to this partnership for roads. It shows that Costco is on board and is signed and is ready to go. And the TIB applications were due in September, so we've already submitted ours. They start making their review in October. And so part of the reason why we're on this timeline is because we wanted to make an application this year. This year the TIB has money. Next year, you've all probably heard of McCleary, the TIB may not have money. And so part of, if we didn't make this funding cycle, what we were concerned about is that the money may not be there next year, or it may be there in a smaller dose. And if that were to happen, then the city would be forced to pay more of its share out of its own pocket. And so we believe there's a public good to move this project through at this speed, and we know that it's causing you guys to have to kind of take a lot in really quickly, and we apologize for that, but this is kind of where we are. So hopefully that was clear.
Yeah, again, back to our first meeting, this was an issue back then, is that the speed of it, because it almost, you're betting you're going to get this money. If we would slow this down, you might not get it. You still might not get it, and then what happens? Again, the city's on the hook.
Right. So the city is, so this question came up at the Council Infrastructure Committee meeting, and it was raised by another nearby property owner who's worried that the city's going to, at the end of the day, form a local improvement district and ask the property owners to basically pay the city's share of this transportation improvement. The city at this point is saying that, and I have not seen the document, but it's coming from our finance director. The city is saying that it can backstop its obligation under this MTFA. So we have either, and whether it's councilmatic bonds or using some other tool, the city has the ability to raise its share of this MTFA. And part of the reason is, and again, this isn't just a project that benefits Costco. This is on the city's TIP. This is part of the overall street improvement projects that we've identified citywide that we need to build. You know, along with 12th Avenue overcrossing and reconfigure the Front Street interchange. And we have all this $300 million suite of road projects that, you know what, we need to build at some point. This is a way for us to kind of take 50 million of that and get it off and going. So you're right. I mean, there's risk here, but this is what the city should be doing. The city should be figuring out a way to build its transportation projects. And this is a great way for us to do it in partnership with our biggest city employer, and not having to burden the individual property owners for the benefit.
Go ahead.
So this is mostly just maybe for Lucy, a question to help you understand exactly what is now the form of what's in front of us for recommendation, because we've got lots of documents here. We've got a number of amendments. So when we get to the point of making a motion, if we get there tonight, I'm trying to understand what are the documents that would make up the recommendation that would be transmitted to the council.
So,
Lucy, I would just add to Commissioner Brennan's question, on page 8 of 8 of the document that is dated August 28th, there is a proposed motion.
that was an initial one. It's been revised because we've had subsequent documents.
Right.
And the reason we didn't include it in your packet was we didn't want to be presumptuous. But we do have a draft recommendation, which I can put up on the screen so that we can edit it. But we are looking for a recommendation on the master site plan amendment with the 3 conditions that you have in front of you, and the 8 conditions with the development agreement. So those are 2 separate recommendations.
Okay. And then, just the other piece, there are certain things that, well, I've got the microphone, that are kind of outside the scope of generally what the Development Commission authority is, generally what, on those things that we're acting on. For example, how we're dealing with the legal agreements with neighboring property owners, and dealing with how do we preserve and maintain those amenities that are already existing as part of the master site plan that exists today as that moves forward. Those are all important things that need to be worked through, that are still, at least for me, I'm still not clear about how that all plays forward and how they're preserved, and how the obligations are defined for future maintenance and care. But so my thought there is there will be things that we would like the council to focus their attention on. These are concerns that continue to exist that require council's additional consideration, and we would identify what those would be as part of the recommendation that we would carry forward.
Right, and that's part of why it seemed important to be able to write it on screen.
Yeah.
That you may, instead of us presuming that we knew if there. So when we've worked with the Urban Village Development Commission on previous development agreements, for instance, a commission often is not technically prepared to review the MTFA, for instance. And they may say, we recommend the development agreement, but we have not reviewed the following sections. We are not making a recommendation on the MTFA. Or we're making a recommendation with certain considerations. And so we're prepared to draft those with you tonight as you need them to be drafted.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chair, for the issue about the proportion from Costco and the city of Issaquah, we're talking about 51 million, 48 versus 52%. If the dollar amount doesn't come through, should have, could have, and doesn't come through as the amount, I don't know how much we're looking for from the feds, is that correct? Or the transportation board? Yeah, if the dollar amount doesn't come through, the whole dollar amount that you're looking for, it's a reduced dollar. Not, a reduced dollar amount that comes through. Is Costco still obligated to come up with 27 million? If 27 is the 48%.
So think about it this way. So the partnership percentages are the same, and the road project is the road project, and the road project is made up of 3 pieces. That's going to stay the same. So we're not talking about changing the project, and we're not talking about changing the partnership. So if the city cannot get all of its funding, it would have to figure out a different tool to pay for its share. So and the city, we have a number of tools. So grant money is the best one because that comes from the state and doesn't come out of the local coffers. Some of the grant monies come with a match. But here we get to actually use the private dollars for the match. So this is a really great deal for the city. And this is why we put this together this way. But at the end of the day, if, let's say that there's $10 million left over that the city has to pay for, well, we'll sit down with the council, talk that through. We'll figure it out with the finance director on what's the best way for us to raise the $10 million that we need to finish this obligation that we're making with Costco. We would do that. That's not an issue for us.
So there's no way out. This is a deal once we're signed up. Costco says we will pay the 48%, 24 million, and the rest, Issaquah, you're going to have to come up with it. And right now, part of it is coming from the transportation board. If the transportation board reduces their obligation, then the city of Issaquah needs to cough up the money, there's no way that the city can back off on this deal then?
The way that we've drafted the agreement is let's say that Mount Rainier blows and all of a sudden, our reservoirs are all gone and our streets are all gone. We're not building their road. We're doing a lot of other stuff. So,
Right.
so there are provisions in there if just everything is chaos, that we got to take care of all of our essentials first. But other than that, we can't choose to say, gee, we really want to go build a new city hall and not build your road. That we can't do. So we can't arbitrarily decide not to fulfill the contract that we've executed or we are proposing to execute with them through the development agreement. It's a contract.
Yeah, well, it's not arbitrary. If the transportation board doesn't come up with the money, we just don't have it.
It's not predicated on that. So we have the money. It can come in a number of different manners that we get it, either through grants or through passing bonds or some other tool. We can get our portion. If the council adopts this development agreement, what they're saying is they're backstopping their obligation for the $27 million that we're making towards this road project. Period. And if we're lucky enough to get some of that offset with grants, then we're doing a good job.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Is there any other clarifications, questions? All right,
Yes, I do.
oh, go ahead.
Still confused on Mr. Seaver's comments when, if I understood what he said, bottom line is we can do what we want, but if the PPOA decides they don't want to move ahead with this, they can stop it. Is that kind of what I heard? He said they're going to have to deal with us. So I'm really confused on where the leverage is or what happens.
So I'm going to give you, so I'm not a lawyer. There are lawyers in this room, but I'm not a lawyer. What I understand is that, so Pickering Place, unlike a lot of other properties, like your property, my property, unless you're happen to be in a development that has binding CC&Rs, most people don't have to necessarily, work with their neighbors. They don't have to. In the case of Pickering, there are covenants on the property that limit the amount of development. And as Mr. Seaver said, you couldn't do residential even if he wanted to build housing in Pickering today. He can't do it without amending the CC&Rs. So Costco does need to amend the CC&Rs. They do need to get a master site plan amendment to be removed from the master site plan because it's a limit. And they do need to get a development agreement to get some surety for kind of the commitments they're making on the roads. So all three of those things need to happen. And, you really, I don't think you can just focus on one at a time. They do need to work, and there is a group at Costco working with their neighbors on amending the CC&Rs. But that does need to happen. That's my understanding.
But that's separate from the cities.
Right.
All of these things need to be done.
So let me just kind of go to let's say we say, oh boy, this is the greatest thing we ever saw. We want to recommend to the council that they go ahead. What happens in relation to Pickering Place?
So if the CC&Rs aren't amended, is that what you were asking, or?
I guess I'm really confused on. We're in a rush. We want to get this done for all the reasons that have been said, and so we decide to go ahead and this is a really great deal and a bargain for the city because it'll save us all this money. We make the recommendation to the city council, but there's still this cloud of the Pickering Place organizational constraints, CC&Rs that may or may not get approved by that board or that group. Where does that leave us?
So if we were, so the meeting we had on Monday, and I think I'm going to say the same thing Jim did, so if it sounds different, let me know. The meeting we had on Monday, if our walk away from that meeting was that we had a bunch of property owners that were like, oh my gosh, no, we do not want Costco to build these new buildings. We don't want this new road. We don't want to change. We like status quo. We hate the Central Issaquah plan. I'd be worried because I'd be thinking, well, geez, this is a huge mountain to get over, and I don't know that they've got the patience to do that. What I heard was the same thing Mr. Sievers heard was, we got issues with them parking on our property, and if we just, if we sign off on the CC&R amendment, well, now they're going to have 3 times as much building as they have now, which means, yeah, I'm going to do the math. There's 3 times as many people parking on my property that I don't want. So they need to figure out their parking issue with their neighbors. And frankly, I don't think that's that hard. I mean, I think if everybody's pointing in the same direction, you just need to sit down in a room and figure it out. And so what I heard, the commitment from the people in the room is that they are willing to have meetings. Basically, their next scheduled meeting, the way I understand it, is January. But as Mr. Sievers mentioned, they usually talk about cutting grass and budget and other things. So they were talking about having special meetings to talk about this and get it figured out. What I heard from them is if they can have a little bit of a longer leash, and what we talked about was maybe the first quarter of next year, so maybe let's just, for lack of anything else, say March, they could probably have this figured out. That's the impression I got from them. So what we're talking about here with these documents that the city controls is we can go ahead and get these done, and we can have the Public Works Director get his documents to TIB. And then basically the window stays open so Costco's not going to sign the development agreement, I don't believe. This is my belief. They might say differently, but my belief is they won't sign the development agreement if they don't get the CC&Rs amended, because basically they're kind of stuck. So we're going through this with an expectation that they can work with their neighbors and get their parking issue worked out. And I just have to believe that that's the case, because we're talking about a lot of money and a lot of development.
Keith, let me follow up on that, and let me try to make this a little bit more focused. Lucy, would you go over the parking space part of this and what Costco is proposing to do with regard to parking to accommodate this growth? And then if we can get I personally, I don't speak for the other commissioners on this, I would like to get a better understanding of how what Costco is proposing for parking compares with the head count that are going to be in these new buildings, because that seems to me to be the fundamental issue. Mm-hmm. And if Costco comes back and says, we got a parking place and a half for every 4th employee and we expect this number of employees, then, maybe this is a non-issue. The flip side of that, or the follow-up question is, in a worst-case scenario, that this organization, and I don't want to conjecture here about whether or not they're going to do it or not, but if there is a serious attempt on their part, successful or not, to block it, at what point does it come back, if at all, if Costco continues to pursue this, does it come back to review of whether it's the DC or whatever in terms of what is being proposed? So first place, how many parking places for how many people in the current plan?
So parking standards aren't based on people, they're based on square footage.
Right.
The standards in Central Issaquah are for a range of 2 per 1,000 to 4 per 1,000. Their parking is in, there's existing parking lot with the warehouse. There is a 5-story parking garage which has been built. They have built that 5-story parking garage so that it can accommodate 2 more floors. The columns and everything were designed for that. So they would add those 2 floors. And then the office buildings are shown having 1 to 2 floors of parking underneath. And off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly what that is.
In terms of the number of,
Parking stalls
Yeah.
per 1,000.
well, there were some pretty specific numbers in there, but frankly. I don't
Right,
remember.
it's on the very first staff report you received, and I'm sure you all brought every document with you. It's the very last page. Steve? I want to make sure I'm reading this right.
We sure have a lot of finger pointing.
Here it is. Okay. Jason, parking stall.
I was just conferring. So at ultimate build-out, that would be 2 per 1,000. At interim stages, it may be more. I think their thought is that as it builds out over 30 years with the multimodal split, that would be sufficient. 2 per 1,000 meets the minimum requirement.
The second question was, well, I'll withhold it. It's too theoretical, so I don't want to waste time.
You were asking if something happened and they'd had to
Yep.
come back. I think you're probably right about that. It would have to probably be a substantial change before it would come back to the DC.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just point of clarification, the proposal that Commissioner Morgan made about chopping, I don't want to say chop, but opening up the view as we're driving south, where do we go with that? Is that what will be put on the recommendation? Yeah,
I think it would come up as a condition,
condition? Okay.
a recommendation.
Okay. And that being the case, I would second that. Also, I would like to add, we talk about the sky bridge, and you said there's we're down to 1 sky bridge. Am I correct when you say that?
One sky bridge crossing the right-of-way. There
Oh,
is
one sky
another,
bridge.
there are sky bridges connecting every pair of buildings,
Uh-huh.
but
So would that be the one connects 4B and Building 5? Oh, they get,
Oh, I do? Okay, that'll show, thank you. So there are 2 sky bridges shown over right-of-way. They are allowed to pick one of those and build one of those. They would need to come back for additional approval to build a second sky bridge over the right-of-way. All the other sky bridges that are shown connecting buildings are currently allowed.
because it's not on public right-of-way.
Well, because we're supportive of it in terms of the things that it balances, and because the commission has not raised, that has not been a concern that the commission has raised. The main commission concern that we've heard is over the right-of-way, so that's the piece that we've focused on.
Okay, okay. I don't know if it's, I guess my thought is keeping it open span between buildings and no intermediate columns is what I'm looking for. And I don't know where you would put that in your recommendation to the council.
Well, I think the first thing that we would have to discuss, Ray, is whether there's a basis in the central Issaquah standards for doing that.
Okay, okay.
And I think when we get to our individual recommendations
All right,
and observations, we can certainly, on an individual basis, address the sky bridges as well as the other issues.
okay,
Okay?
okay. Thank you.
Opportunities for collaboration with the state park system and/or connection to that. I mean, I think that personally, I'd like to understand where that issue is right now, and the specific impact that we can identify of this development on the CIP trail connection, which obviously one of the major parts of that is eventually is the state park.
Sure. When we went to so, let me see if I can. So when, and I'm not sure how well this shows up. That had been a question that one of the council people had asked, and so I went through the Central Issaquah plan and the Central Issaquah standards, looking for the references and description and relationship between the districts, the Central Issaquah districts that are around it. So to start with, so these are little excerpts, and this was a handout, so I apologize. I hadn't planned to show it on screen, so it's a little difficult to see. This is the park in this area. There are 3 districts, Sammamish Park, Pickering, and Eastlake, that are located around it. This sort of central chart on this sheet shows the vision for each of these districts, the uses, the environmental features, and the mobility connections. All of these districts anticipate office, and some of them anticipate residential as well. They all want to integrate with the park and, complement it with corridors and shared use routes. And so part of what we looked at was how are those shown in the mapping that identifies the facilities that would be built. So in the Central Issaquah plan, which is the policy document, let's see, I'm sorry. So it showed, sorry. So it showed this map, which had bike lanes and shared use routes connecting into the park. And the dashed ones are the proposed ones. In the Central Issaquah plan, Central Issaquah standards, it showed essentially the same routes. And so our expectation is that as those properties either more fully develop, we're not sure how much open land there is, or they redevelop, that would be the opportunity at which those additional routes would be added. I think what our citizens were asking for was that because we are adding additional density, that those routes would be associated with the approval of this development agreement.
Okay. Gentlemen? Thank you, Lucy. All right. I think if there are not more requests for clarification, I think we've come to the point where we can start with our individual assessment of all of the material and all of the testimony that or the hearings that we've conducted, that you have conducted, one of which I have participated in. So as usual, we'll start with Mr. Soa, the chair at the far end, and end up with me. With the chair.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the efforts of the city staff. I think you did a good job of explaining. It finally got into my head, especially when you made the comment that the CC&Rs are still binding. I mean, we can change the master site plan, but the bottom line is the CC&Rs are still going to have an overarching effect on what Costco can or can't do. And that clip finally, sorry to be so dense. I think obviously the effort sounds like it's a positive change. There's a fundamental sense of a need for trust. And I think as we continue to work in this new environment, that will start to prove to be good or bad. And so the concern right now is we don't know. It sounds good, yeah, but I've been sold a lot of stuff that sounded good that necessarily didn't turn out to be. My teeth aren't any brighter than they were. So anyway, I don't really have any substantive comments. I appreciate the effort, and I appreciate the public and their comments. That was really helpful.
Yeah. Thanks for the effort, Lucy and Keith. That was very detailed work that you've done and very prompt in getting to us so that we could wait till the last minute to review it. But thank you. I think this project, it's a good opportunity for the city to get together with a big employer, Costco, here in Issaquah. If we could work things out, if we can take up the opportunity, I would surely support that. But again, it goes back to, we need to be careful as we move along here. And it goes back to the trust that Costco has to give, they're asking for. Just give us the project and we'll move along here. I guess that's the reason why we have our jobs here, is to kind of look over the benefit of Issaquah. So you can call it bureaucracy, but basically it's looking after the interests of the city of Issaquah's population community. On the Sky Bridge, I guess I would ask Lucy if you could look into that. If it's in the CIP, then that's fine. If not, perhaps we should put a condition or on the recommendation to say if Sky Bridge is decided, if the applicants decide to have a Sky Bridge, the Sky Bridge shall be an open span between buildings, no intermediate columns, and limited to, I'm thinking 80 to 90% glass. And as far as connecting, right now I guess I'm envisioning maybe one Sky Bridge, one level of Sky Bridge. And if it goes up to 10th floor, then the Costco probably wants to add another Sky Bridge. And if that becomes the case, then either come back to the city for approval or some sort of approving agency that would look into that, if that's what the applicants wants to do. But I have a lot of good faith in Costco in their design, and same thing with Mulvaney. So they've done a good job so far, but it's just something that I think it would be check and balance that it comes back here. Thank you.
So this has been a bit confusing as we're kind of blazing new ground here with this development agreement and amending a master site plan and dealing with transportation funding agreement and et cetera. And so there's a lot of pieces to this one. which has made it confusing a bit for us, for me anyway. But I'm starting to get enough of a grasp of this to try to get a sense for kind of where to go. First of all, the reality that we're in is we need to get this to the council so they have time to consider it before this deadline to submit for a grant consideration. So sitting on it really isn't an option, and there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and so some of those are issues that need to be further explored, I think, at the council level. So I want to suggest some of those. I think, first of all, and we've already heard about that, the issue regarding the legal agreements that are in place related to the current Pickering Place master development plan or master site plan are, with legal staff, need to be clarified. I think for the benefit of the council and I think for the community, et cetera. I think the trail connections to the park, we've heard about that and the importance of the integration of the work that's happening with this part of the Central Issaquah plan and how that's going to really accentuate the trail system that's there and build upon that, and particularly to the state park, because the future plans for the state park really are much more than what exists there today. And so I think we want to make sure that we're really taking advantage of that, and whatever can happen as part of this development and be inputted in as part of, or conditioned as part of this development should happen. But otherwise, you know, the funds that become available as the city continues to grow and densify to actually make those connections happen. I think it's another thing that the council really needs to be thinking about, how that part of the broader Central Issaquah plan is implemented, and what place does this agreement have in accomplishing that versus kind of the broader strategies that the city has in place. So I think that's another area the council needs to think about. I think there's this risk for city funding. We've heard about that, and I think the issue regarding the transportation funding agreement is really out of scope for the Development Commission, but it is something that the council really needs to weigh in on. It's very much a policy question for at the council level, in the level of risk the city wants to take, and entering this agreement before there's a funding, there's funding that's being relied on coming from another source that really isn't in place yet. So that's a risk factor the council needs to weigh. So I think that's one that needs additional council consideration. There's another piece in here, and it's kind of legislative, but it's not, and it has to do with the role of the Development Commission into the future related to this project and as this moves forward. I understand Costco's desire to have as much certainty as they can get. They're putting in a significant amount of money for this. They're looking for long-term commitment from the city and certainty in how they can develop their property, meet their corporate needs and staff and employee needs into the future. And I understand that. But at the same time, I'm wondering, why does the city give up the kind of level of oversight and quality of design in this particular agreement that we hold all of the other larger projects to as we move ahead? So I'm still a little bit, and I raised that at previous meetings, about why are we changing the level of oversight for these projects as they go through the development permit process here. I don't understand. I think that's something that a lot of the issues that you've heard us talk about get addressed as part of the development process as we go through those, and ensuring that the standards are being satisfied and the interests of the city are being addressed and the design is of high quality. Now, I will say that the work that you did kind of showing the progression of the design and development of their projects on their campus really showed a movement to a really great quality project. And I have great confidence in Costco and their design team to accomplish that. But at the same time, I think there are certain nuances and interests that the city has that it wants to carry out, not just on this campus, but throughout the city, that we want to hold consistent to the rest of the development that happens in the city. So on that, over-explaining myself there, but I guess my point is I'm not sure that we should give up on the level of design quality oversight in this agreement and exclude that from that process that is the rest of development in the Central Issaquah area is going to be subject to. So that is one of my concerns, and in fact I know that's talked about in the development agreement, and I dug around trying to find it, and I couldn't find it, but find that section, but it's talked about in one of the amendments. The parking, I just want to comment on the parking challenges. Mr. Seaver's comments, he's been pretty consistent through his public comments, and I appreciate you being here again this evening. I know it's a commitment of your time. Parking challenges between properties is pretty common occurrence in urban areas, and we try to deal with that through development standards and making sure there is adequate parking for whatever the uses are. And we try to design parking so that it is in a proximity that is, serves the use well. But there are lots of other factors that come into how parking gets laid out, and really it boils down to it's a property owner to property owner parking management challenge that you just need to figure out how to solve. And it sounds like you've got the door open now, which is awesome. And to have that conversation, and it sounds like Costco's done some work already to try to put some controls in place. But that's not really something we're going to be able to deal with here. And so it's kind of out of the range of what we can get at in the development agreement. But I do think it's an important friction point that needs to be, continue to be pursued. I think it's going to be an important thing. So I guess those are my comments at this point. I guess interested in hearing other commission members, feedback on some of these points that we want to push forward to the council, and also the question about the process change that's been integrated here. So.
First of all, thanks very much to the staff for the great work they've done, Lucy and Keith. You've really done a lot of work, and I very much appreciate the fact that all the questions that have come up, you've responded to. You've done a good job of encapsulating the questions that have been raised by both the commissioners and by the public, and trying to address those when you've come back to us. That's been an excellent, and I appreciate very much the work that Costco's done, working with the city and coming in front of us, answering questions as we've got them, and especially appreciate the public coming in to provide us input. And in general, Costco is a great corporation to have in the city of Issaquah. I think we all recognize that. An excellent employer. They're good jobs to have. It is exactly what we want to see within central Issaquah. When we talk about live, work, play, work is a huge part of that. And to the extent that we have more jobs in downtown Issaquah, it's always better for us. And I think, as Commissioner Brennan pointed out, the design of the Costco buildings, I think, has shown us that they can do an excellent job, and they have done an excellent job in designing buildings that are really a great fit for what we want to see downtown. And Lucy, I very much appreciated the progression you showed us of how those building designs changed, and I think improved greatly. There are, I think, some issues that this has been sort of a confusing process, I think, for all of us, a learning process. Some issues that I still think are outside of our purview, which would be the owners association issues that I keep thinking, I don't think those are things that we can address here. I do think they need to be worked out, especially with the parking, but I don't think that can really be part of our decision process. The same, I think, would be true of some of the off-site traffic issues that we heard in our last meeting about design of some of the traffic to the east of here. I just don't think that's for us to get involved in. One of the questions that comes up that I've pondered a lot is the Development Commission role. As Commissioner Brennan pointed out, the reduction in our role going forward for the buildings over 150,000 square feet. And it really is, it's the elimination, I think, of the decision. The process can stay the same in terms of the community conference and the input we provide to the administration, to staff. It's just that we don't get to make the decisions on those as we would now. In a way, I don't feel that we're the appropriate body to make that decision, whether we should do that, because we'd be deciding our own fate, and I think our fate lies in the hands of the mayor and the council, and we shouldn't be here to tell them what we can and can't do as a commission. So that part I almost ignore somewhat and leave it to the council to decide how much power they want to give our commission to do. So, but I do appreciate the fact that by having community conferences and providing input to staff, when buildings do come up, that hopefully our voice would be heard and the public would have a chance to opine on things. In general, I think removing Costco from the master site plan amendment makes sense, given how long the MSP was put in, how long ago it was put into place, and how much things have changed, including the central Issaquah plan since then. As to the land use plan, I think we're trying to fit a square peg truly into a round hole. The land use standards for the Central Issaquah plan, and I was the chair of the subcommittee that wrote the standards, so I got pretty close to them. We're really designed for the idea of a square, rectangular street type design you would see in a typical city, bringing buildings to the front, parking behind, and so forth. It didn't envision really how do you fit that into an existing corporate campus, curvilinear streets that was designed in the 80s perhaps. So trying to do that, I think, creates a lot of problems. However, I think big picture, Central Issaquah plan is better off with more jobs downtown and less straight, if it's the sacrifice of fewer straight streets and corners. I do still feel like the view issue is something that of Squawk Mountain that I'll bring up an amendment about. So, thank you.
The nice thing about being near the end is all we can say is we agree with everybody in front of us. I would like to compliment the staff again on answering the questions and presenting it, clear answers to what we've asked the prior meetings. Similarly, I'd like to compliment the members of the public that have attended these, and in the past maybe put up with a more stringent chair in regards to how long people were left to talk. I'd echo what Commissioner Brennan and Morgan both said. My problem has been all along has been the speed of which we are doing this in regards to the funding. And now, tonight, all of a sudden we were, at least new to me, we were told that there's one little other aspect of this called the CC&Rs. And I'm concerned about what we're doing to try to get this money. We're rushing this through, and I understand, I agree that we can't wait another 2 weeks and beat this horse again. It's got to go to the commission or this council and let them decide. But I'm concerned that we're going to the TIB, and that's why we want to go to them, because we want to have this develop agreement to prove that this is a real thing. Now, I don't think they exist in a vacuum, and they might be looking at this saying, yeah, but what about those CC&Rs? It may be a real thing with the development agreement, but that's only if we can get over that CC&R hurdle, and I don't think that that's necessarily something that can't be accomplished. But it's one more of those variables, would have, could have, should have, that bothers me a little bit. It bothers me a lot. I'm also a little concerned, well, I'm pleased that the city finally got together, and I don't know if it's finally or based on encouragement from the commission, that you've had a meeting, but I'm a little concerned that you had that meeting Monday. And we had to get the meeting in and get some response because we're having a development commission meeting Wednesday. And I would have preferred to have the city have been more proactive with the members of the PPOA, particularly with this now overriding CC&R issue. Again, it may be beyond our scope, and the council will have to deal with it. As to the development agreement and the land plan, I personally think that Costco's design it looks fine to me. I mean, some of this is going to vary as to where the building is going to be aligned. I think Commissioner Morgan's plan to straighten out Lake Avenue to get the view might or might not work with what you guys have got already invested in your design plan, but it's something certainly to consider. I would just hope that we can, not we, the council can figure out whether they want to take the risk, which is what it is at some point. This is a valuable agreement with Costco to get roads that we want and need, and the city has to decide whether they want to accept that risk going forward. Thank you.
I'd like to start by making an observation, and I think anybody that knows, has been in these meetings, knows that I put great stock in not only the staff consistently excellent work, but we always have applicants that do very good work. And then we have the members of the public, which I believe are crucial, and I say at every meeting, are absolutely crucial to this process. That said, there was an observation or a statement made earlier this evening that the DC rubber stamps, I think, is an accurate phrase for issues, programs, whatever, that come before us for review. I would take issue, and I'd like to do it on the record, because I believe that, as far as I can recall, there has not been a single presentation to this commission since I've been on it wherein, when it came to the final decisions, the commission has not made recommendations, very specific recommendations that in some cases were required significant changes. Sometimes they didn't. But there is, again, the point is that the members of this commission spend a great deal of their private time reviewing documents and plans and attending these meetings. And it is always with a view toward balancing the interests of the taxpayers of the city and the applicant in question, whether it's a private citizen or a business. That's our job. And we do it with due consideration for all of the factors involved as far as we can, and we have and will continue to make recommendations that will result in changes by the applicant. So we're not a rubber stamp. I want to make that really clear. When it comes to the time frame, I too was concerned about that. For those of you who don't know, I've missed the previous meetings because I was out of the country. And I was a little taken aback by the time frame. We've already talked about this, and I understand why. I don't have a problem with the time frame now, but what I do have a continuing concern about is that this seems to me to require us to trust, where that word has come up. Costco is going to do the right thing when it comes to the facades of the buildings, the landscaping plan and things like that we normally see. And I don't see us getting the opportunity to do that going forward with this project. And if it were anybody else, frankly, but Costco, a company that has the history here, that has the demonstrated progression of their design, I would be very concerned. But the Development Commission exists, in my opinion, it exists to represent the continuity of the plans that have been put in place by the elected members and the staff. And I don't see us getting the opportunity to do that when it comes to what the buildings are going to look like. So again, if it's Costco, trust but verify. Right? That's, if it's good enough for strategic arms limitation basis, trust but verify. That's what that's what I would like to see us get the opportunity to do. Quickly, the Sky Bridge, one of the things that I noted when I was in Europe was the buildings, the palaces and so on, that had sky bridges. As a matter of fact, I find myself taking pictures of sky bridges because as I was walking down the street, they caused me to look at the vista under the sky bridge. So I absolutely understand that this is the Pacific Northwest. We usually get, 12 months of winter. Sometimes we get lucky. So moving people back and forth between buildings, I mean, it hasn't even been mentioned, but it's an environmental issue as far as I'm concerned, as well as the other things that have been mentioned. The applicant, as I understand, has already agreed to reduce the number of sky bridges over rights of way, and there is also a security issue. My concern, though, and it's not really a concern, I would hope that the sky bridge cannot be completely functional, but it will also have an aesthetic value in the design. But again, we haven't seen the design yet. But I would urge that in addition to not blocking the vista, but offering the gateway aspect of it, that some real attention be given to the actual aesthetic value of the sky bridge itself. Okay? The last thing that I'd like to say is that I think the council, when it comes to the role of the Development Commission, which is changing, I personally think the council needs the recommendations of the Development Commission. Council members have a lot on their plate. And when it comes to things like this, I believe that the demonstrated history that we all know is, as with any executive position, you rely on staff reports and you rely on the educated expressions of opinions on relevant issues provided by commissions and boards and things like that. So I personally, I don't quite know if we stop producing the kinds of recommendations and observations and conditions, recommended conditions and amendments, if we either stop doing that or significantly reduce that, I don't know where the commission or the council is going to get that information, other than from staff, which is, and I'm not questioning the value or the validity or whatever, but the DC does provide a separate set of recommendations and observations that can be accepted or denied or ignored by the council members as they see fit. But I don't quite understand who's going to provide the product that we now and have traditionally provided if we don't do it anymore. So that to me is kind of a going forward, what is the role of the Development Commission? And I understand, we all do, that the city's looking at all the boards and commissions, as it should, in my opinion. But I think that has to be, if not the primary consideration for what we do, it has to be a major consideration. Where do they get it if they don't get it from us? Okay? Commissioner?
I just like to add one more comment too. We've had 3 meetings in 4 weeks. We've approved 3 sets of minutes, and none of those minutes had any edits to them at all. And I just wanted to add accolades to Susan Lowe, our recording secretary, for the excellent work that she does. And I know in my case, making me sound far more cogent than I truly am. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that, because she does do amazing.
Yeah, and the last thing, the last thing is that this is a function that is, in my opinion, I can't stress this enough. This is a trust issue, not just internally, but it's a trust that there is an entity that doesn't represent the city, that the staff, that doesn't represent the applicant, but that represents all of the above and the residents. And the information that we get and the decisions that we make based on that information are just a fundamental positive aspect of how this system is supposed to work. And I just got dunked in an Eastern European bureaucratic. I mean, I asked people about that. We don't appreciate how good this system is individually, and we should. And it's tough, and it's messy, and there are loose ends and everything that I hope we're going to get a chance to address. But that said, it's good work by everybody. Okay? Commissioner?
In looking over my notes, I skipped over something that I wanted to bring up that concerned me a little bit. Connie Marsh made the comment that there was additional information that she'd provided that we didn't get, and I don't know if that's, I don't know if that was fact. I don't know if there was. I don't know if there was enough time to be able to provide that as an opportunity for us, but it really seems that in the messiness of this process, the value of making sure that we have the opportunity to see as much in advance as we can the public input. And you've done a great job. I mean, at one point I was thinking, holy smokes, if they send me one more letter, I'm never going to get this read. But it's really valuable, and I think I know we all take input from the public as real serious, and we really pay attention to that. So if there was, I just encourage the staff to make sure that you do as good a job as you've been doing to get us information as soon as possible.
And just since that probably came to me, I'm going to go ahead and give you my excuse if there is one needed. So Mr. Kapler and Ms. Marsh both forwarded documents to me this morning and asked that we get those to the Development Commission. The item that Ms. Marsh referenced that she wondered if you got was a video that she took walking through the Costco campus, and she did it for the council committee, and if she asked me to forward that to you guys, I did not get that message. So, I apologize to her on TV for that, but that was not something done purposely. So we do try to get stuff to you. It's difficult when it comes in the day of the commission meeting, given the fact that we're in meetings for much of the day.
And I wasn't looking for an apology as much as I was just, you've done a great job of getting us information. Like I said, at one point I was thinking, holy smokes, if you give me any more stuff, I'm going to die. But just maybe most importantly, to let the public know how serious we take that information and that feedback from them.
And I'll just say that I had plans for this morning, but when I received the, I don't know how many pages?
18, I believe.
18 pages that required review and consideration, the plans went out the window, which is another thing that I get to about the work that the DC does. I mean, I just can't, I was so impressed with what I looked at in aggregate. It's, it's good work. Okay, enough patting ourselves on the back. Or me. All right, so gentlemen, the next issue, I believe, is to consider our collective position on the motions, if there are.
So
is there any further
staff had a motion to kind of set the foundation for a recommendation? Maybe that's a good place to start.
Yes, I agree.
Well, and also, I think that the MSPA, too many initials. The master site plan amendment needs to come first, and that may be a simpler one to get through the recommendation and then craft the conditions that come with the recommendation on the development agreement.
And my understanding, and again, I want to get this on the record, my understanding is that if the MSPA is not approved, then the DA is moot.
The master site plan, because it limits the amount of square footage in Pickering, it basically, if you guys decided that that was the most important thing and we need to keep that sacred, then the development agreement is moot because they can't grow. So it seems like tackling that issue first. And then maybe the second thing, Lucy, just as a suggestion, as you guys talked, I wrote down, I've got 9 things that I think you guys identified. I think what we need to do is figure out if there's majority on these 9 things, or if there's a majority on only 5 of them or 3 of them, and then we can start working on language if you want to forward language to the council on these things that you guys have identified as you went around. I mean, it may be because nobody objected, Maybe it means that y'all agree with it, but it just seemed like y'all kind of talked about what you found important. I wrote down 9 things. So maybe that's, if we can get past the MSPA, so many letters, especially at night, then maybe we talk about these and we go through this list and see if you guys feel as a majority whether these things are the things.
As amendments to the
So as part of the
proposal?
recommendation to the council,
Yeah.
and just to give you examples, things like trail connections to the park, talking about the CIP and Costco and how it all fits together in a big vision. I wrote down kind of the topics that you guys brought up, not the exact words. And if you guys feel like, yes, a majority of you feel like you want to address a recommendation related to the trail connection, then we can start crafting words on what that would mean.
Let me.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, Keith. But what I would suggest is that we see if the commission can come up with the proposed wording on both of the issues, the MSPA and the DA. They're 2 separate votes, if you will, that we're going to take with appropriate amendments that are going to. So let's see if we can come up with them, and then at the point where the proposal or the motion is made, we can determine if there are any further amendments that are necessary.
So I believe that the MSPA, so I'm just going to summarize what I've heard, that if you are recommending to council approval, and I haven't heard which way the commission's leaning, the only topic I've heard are Carl's edits to condition number 2, which I can drop into the motion as, including edits to the following edit to condition number 2. Otherwise, if it is a recommendation to approve, there is language here that could be used.
Okay.
So I can drop that language, the edit in, and then you can read the motion and see if you would want to change it in any way.
So Lucy, if I can offer a friendly amendment to your suggestion, because I think one of the things that the commission wanted addressed, at least what I heard from a couple commission members, is to send forth a recommendation to the council to consider this issue about the CCNRs and the PPOA, and just to make sure that they're tracking on the complexities of that arrangement. And that may want to go with the MSPA and not with the DA. And so just as a point of order, if you were going to do that, that might want to go there as opposed to in the other camp.
Commissioners?
So how about the timing? How's that going to go? Are you going to craft it in and then for us to review, or go straight to the council?
We're going to try and do that work tonight.
Yeah.
So I hope you have coffee in that thermos of yours.
So our objective tonight is to make a decision on the 2 issues, approval or disapproval, and to forward our recommendations to the council with the attendant amendments that are already some of them have already been given to us a number of times, and if we have any additional amendments that we want to make, then we should do that now, tonight, in order to have a complete with the time frame, as complete a set of recommendations to the council as we can deliver from the commission.
So let me try to make sure I'm clear here, maybe provide some clarification. So for me, the way I think about this is that the motions, the formal motions that we make, are going to be specific recommendations that we want to see included in the agreements. Right. They're going to be modifications to the agreements, and they're going to be binding eventually. If it goes through and the council agrees to whatever we suggest here or whatever we recommend. There are the other categories, and maybe the 9 things that you have on your list, Keith, and these are other areas that we think the council needs to direct some attention. But we don't have to get overly formal about that. It's really identifying those kind of key areas that the council needs to be thinking about, aware of, that we had some concerns or we had robust conversation around these things and want them to, because they're either out of the scope of the commission or, is, for example, the issue of the role of the commission in the future. Those are really things that are council policy choices. So we can just identify those with some fairly general language, and we can let staff kind of craft that, because you've been here, you've listened to the conversation, and I'm confident that would be effectively communicated. But I think we need to make sure that the language in the motions is exactly what we want to include in what would transpire as formal agreements eventually. So that's my understanding of the path we're on here.
Anybody else? I personally agree.
Yeah, I think I'm real interested in the motions, but I'm also interested in those recommendations, because there were a few that were fairly specific that I didn't agree with, at least one. So I want to hear them. I'd like to be able to have that dialogue, go through those before we walk away from here. I trust the staff, but I'd still like to hear what we're recommending in those areas of concern. I think is what he wrote down, right?
And my understanding of the Robert's Rules of Order are that there will be a motion made, there will be a discussion of the motion. If there are proposals to amend it, those proposals will be made. At that time, we will vote on up or down on each additional amendment, come up with the final wording, including the amendments that have been approved, and vote on that. Did I say something funny?
No, I'm reading what he wrote, and I'm
taking me to
disagreeing
task
with
on.
All right, trying to inject a little humor into the evening here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So,
And, Mr. Chair, just to clarify too, the extent that we make recommendations with conditions, I presume the council can take or refuse, they can do whatever they want. They could change any one of those specifically. It's not a yay or nay.
Or ignore them.
thing. Right.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
okay, so just so I'm clear, are we writing into the agreement now, or identifying it as an amendment so that the council can say yes for amendment 1, no for amendment 2, that kind of thing?
We're going to have ultimately two different votes. One is on the MSPA,
Mm-hmm.
and one is on the development agreement. Both, the wording of those two is different, and there will be amendments, there already are, amendments to both of them that have been discussed in the past that are included up here. What I was saying earlier, Ray, is if there are additional amendments that, as a result of tonight's meeting, that the commission wants to make, they should be proposed, discussed, voted on,
Right.
up or down, and then included
Okay.
in this, and then we vote on the total package, of the two total packages.
Okay.
Does that,
All right.
does that sound right to everybody? I know this is a new process. I mean, the process is changing, folks. So. All right?
Okay.
Okay.
So what I've done is edited the draft based on tonight's discussion and suggestions, and Carl's edits to condition number 2. So I would suggest maybe reviewing this and see if this is appropriate.
Okay, so these are the second one. All right, this is all, what we're looking at here is all the MSPA.
Right,
This is the first one.
just the
Okay,
MSPA.
good.
Mr. Chair, at this point, can I recommend just one small addition to this?
Absolutely.
Just, Lucy, in the first paragraph, says, subject to the conditions as identified in the staff report. Can we say subject to the 3 conditions identified, just so we know that it's?
Sure. Randy, our author, is reading very, very carefully.
Probably should put conditions on the bottom paragraph too then.
Question.
Is your configuration of the building, is that in your?
That would come up in the next motion.
That's the DA, the DA, yeah.
Okay, got you. I'll just dovetail into that then on the Sky Bridge. Is there any more
Yes.
changes?
Did you care for a motion?
Do we have a motion to approve
I'd make a motion that we
the
approve the draft as
as
written.
presented? I'm sorry.
I'd make a motion that we approve the draft as written.
Second?
Is there any discussion, further discussion? And then, all in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimously.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the, oops.
Oh, sorry.
Do we have to approve the motion for the second one as well?
Yeah, the DA, yes.
No, not the DA,
Or-
but the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
To
Prepare
direct the
findings.
staff to prepare.
Oh, right.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the draft motion for preparation of memo of recommendation.
Second?
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously.
Sorry, I went to save, but I was a little too quick. Okay.
Just as a administrative thing, Lucy, I'm sorry, let me
No,
let
no,
you
go
finish.
ahead.
When do you think I've got some other travel on it, but I want to be available when this is presented, is it for me to sign? Would that be like within a week
I
or
think
so?
we're hoping to do it in the next couple of days.
Oh, great, okay.
You don't have to unpack your suitcase.
That was true.
So I need to update the date.
And Lucy, can you add to that the 8 conditions?
Yes, but I don't know that you've got 8 conditions. You may have more conditions.
Why don't we look at those while you do that?
Yeah.
Can we multitask? So can I go to the, suite? All right. so-
Good
Oh, no,
idea.
no, I'm sorry, not those conditions. I
Not
meant
these?
No, no.
Her-
Not the
her-
recommendations.
her 8,
Oh,
con-
those
Yeah,
eight
hers.
those
conditions.
8 conditions,
So you want to
yeah.
look at those now?
No, I just wanted the,
Add
rec-
those in.
add the.
No, he just
Right.
wanted to
Just say to the
say
number
8
8 in there.
conditions. I got that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
yeah, great,
So I've added 8 down here and then 8 up there.
Yep.
great. I know, you go from a finding of fact to a recommendation, just like that. You lost that much power.
Okay,
I did the button and lose the whole
Okay.
damn thing.
so,
So we have the 8 conditions.
right,
And Keith is working on a list for,
The recommend.
no, we're still working the MSBA now. We're not on the DA.
No, we're on the DA.
No.
MSBA you've
Yeah.
done.
Well, right, okay, so these 8 conditions are going to be on the, at the end of, or included in the recommendation on the DA?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Those,
If we
so that
want to.
sheet,
If,
did
if,
you,
if we agree to them.
right, hypothetically speaking.
No.
There's that double-sided sheet that you received tonight that has 8 conditions. Those are the 8
Right.
conditions that Mel was asking me to reference in the 2 motions.
This one?
You might need to clarify, Lucy, just so there's no confusion, that
Are you-
7 is as edited.
Oh, right,
7's the
right.
same as 3.
Okay, I'm gonna, right, I'll fix that.
there a date on that? September 17th.
I was just going to ask if you're going to add that, because it's the same paragraph as the
Yep.
other one. Okay.
I love
So-
this cut and paste stuff.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the development agreement for Costco Wholesale Corporation as drafted.
Second?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to amend condition number 4 to remove the last bullet, in the last bullet point, remove the last phrase beginning with "and at building 4A, taking into account opportunities preserve and or highlight views and vistas," and add an additional bullet point that would read, "At the south end of Lake Drive, maintain the southerly view of Squawk Mountain by either 1, pulling back the southwest section of Building 4 to approximately the line showing the location of the underground parking garage, or 2, revising the south end of Lake Drive to be oriented in a north-south direction from approximately the location of the Sky Bridge between Buildings 4 and 5 to its intersection with the proposed roundabout. If Building 4 is revised as above in 1, Costco shall be allowed to expand the footprint of Building 5 to have the eastern facade match the curvilinear shape of Lake Drive, or expand Building 4's footprint within the bounds of the underground parking garage line."
Discussion?
Second.
I'm sorry. Second? Discussion?
My brain's not getting late, so it's, I'm not thinking as clearly as possible, but it seemed like we limited Costco to building 1 Sky Bridge, and it wasn't obvious to me. It would seem like that recommendation would be contingent upon them building the southernmost Sky Bridge as opposed to the one on the north, and so it would seem like we ought not constrain them. If they choose not to build that southernmost Sky Bridge, then it doesn't make any. I still think a 90-degree intersection is better than a cute one, but that's the engineer in me.
I think you were.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, I'd like to
Discussion.
amend my motion, because I was thinking of that when I was drafting and almost added this verbiage, but I didn't, to say from approximately the location of the Sky Bridge shown on the plans between Buildings 4 and 5 to its intersection with the roundabout. In other words, this is just for the council, what's shown on the plans right now, whether they build that or not, doesn't really matter, it's just so they reference an area. Yeah, so thanks for the question.
So, do we need to reread? Okay.
Yeah.
So-
I've got it written, and I need a second for my,
I did.
No,
Okay.
you got a second. All right. so
no, I
the-
mean on this amendment, Jen?
Oh, on the change?
Great.
Is there, do we have a first? Do we have okay, so you're, all right.
I did the main
you
motion
did-
second. He made an amendment. I
Okay.
seconded both.
Okay,
So-
so, any further discussion?
Yeah, so the one issue that's not addressed there is the required open space. There's a certain square footage of public space that's required in the plan, and part of that was that would be taken up by the expansion of the building to
Building
align with the
5.
road. So I guess my concern is they still have to accomplish that someplace. So I'm guessing in your proposal, they would do that now down at the corner near the roundabout intersection?
Correct.
Okay, so okay.
And the idea, Lucy, I don't know if you can pull that up again easily enough.
There.
So in the upper left-hand corner, so we're talking about Building 5 on the left side not having that public pedestrian area. In essence, that would be replaced by the area that's been taken out by Building 4, that's creating more open pedestrian plaza then.
Okay, so that, because there was conversation about, well, we could have a two-story building there potentially, et cetera. So in this particular proposal, you would flip the open space or the public space over to the corner at Building 4?
Correct.
Okay.
So that would require adjustments of standards and things that are not, we are not, there's some process that goes with that. So that's a concern I have by the kind of clear cutness of this, that some of the process as well as feasibility of moving the road isn't really taken into account. So I'm wondering how we can factor in that there has been no study of either of those proposals in terms of the impacts.
Like, I guess my thought is, since the council wants us to move quickly, and since it's only a recommendation to council, they'll have this in front of them, and they can, between now and when they meet, it would give them time to do
And
their own
sta- and
research
staff
on it.
time.
Staff time,
Yeah.
Okay.
Look at it.
yeah.
So you feel confident that you have the condition? Because
And
I know I don't.
I've got it.
Oh, okay. All right.
I know she would have it perfect anyway.
Okay. I'm just going to say, okay, that's what you put.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, would this be a good place to put the issue on the Sky Bridge,
I
following
think
your
we
bullets?
still need to vote on
Yeah,
this
we-
amendment, I think.
Right, we need to vote on this
You want to
amendment.
do one
yeah.
at a time then?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. Next.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add another bullet to paragraph 4 in reference to the Sky Bridge. And the language would read something along the line of if the applicants decide to install a Sky Bridge, it shall be of one level.
So I believe you're actually editing condition number 3, am I correct?
And, yeah, it could be number 3. I'm not sure whether we could do number 3, because number 3 basically says, you know, it's same thing as the staff report in the imagery. And since we're doing number 4 with the expanding view, it could go either way.
Okay.
Skybridge is under 3, though.
So would you read that again, please?
If the applicants decide to install a Sky Bridge, it shall be of one level, and it shall be of open span with no intermediate structural columns. And with 80, I don't know what 80% of glass means, but
Well, Ray, I have a question about that.
sure.
So you're saying that you want the Costco to be required to build a Sky Bridge that doesn't have any supporting columns?
If they decide to put a Sky Bridge, the Sky Bridge shall be an open span with no intermediate columns, yes.
Including columns that are
It-
structural, that are, say, 4 feet from the building, but don't have any...
No columns at all, just open span.
Okay. That's a proposal?
That's, yeah,
It's a motion.
A motion, rather?
it's a motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
All right, the second is for discussion. The discussion is?
I guess, one of the questions, Lucy, I'll make sure I understand this. Is it section 26 of the agreement addresses Skybridge? Or is that-
It is currently, the whole section is being moved into an exhibit, but that's why it says, you see in condition 3, the edit that says Exhibit J.
Exhibit,
Okay.
That's where all the interpretations and adjustments are going into that
So
exhibit.
some things like there's already the walls of the Skybridge shall be transparent or open approximately 70%, so that's already addressed in there.
Yes, that is a part of the development agreement.
Okay.
The 8 criteria that were in the memo, the briefing response memo, those are taken directly from the development agreement.
Is there any further discussion?
I guess so the one thing I thought, I guess, so we have limits on the width, but we don't, when you say one level, I think, well, what if you have one level, but it's 30 feet tall, just a very high roof? But we don't have a limit on how tall it could be, right?
No, it has to be a minimum of 8 feet high on the inside, but
there's
it
no
doesn't
maximum.
on the outside, or
Yeah.
inside or outside.
Outside,
no.
yeah.
I guess what I was looking for was rather than having 2 floors connecting to 2 floors or 3 floors connecting to 3 floors.
So I guess what I would suggest is if the commission wants to propose this, that it would be one level consistent with the floor levels of the buildings to which it attaches, instead of trying to pick a number that we won't really have any basis for.
Yeah, just for the sake of discussion, I'm really concerned about limiting, I understand the notion of limiting height, but I think would really be a mistake at this stage to take away discretion of an architect to create a really great, wonderful, I mean, the examples of the sky bridges he showed us were all different, and they all fit at least to me, they fit where they were. So I could support maybe a limit on height, but I wouldn't support no intermediate columns. I think that can really create some wonderful frame views. So I just not going to go there.
So just for discussion, so you have some images around those 2 issues. And I know I said this before, but just now that you're thinking more about it, these 2 over the right-of-way use suspension from above. These between buildings do have intermediary columns, and this one is more than one level. The one thing that I noted here was, again, this didn't have columns, although the building does extend out a bit. Costco does use intermediary columns. One thing that struck me is what you said, Rick, was that this one is somewhat more than the level. They've almost added a clerestory, I think, for light and maybe experience as you move through it. So.
Let me just kind of defend on the column. I guess I was trying to get away from having it column and second level, and before you know it, it's a tunnel. And that's why there's the limitation, the maximum limitation on glass is to kind of open it up. You start putting columns in there, and you're squeezing yourself in there. And I'm sure I'm looking at the worst scenario, and that's why I kind of like to open it up. So
Can I just ask
without
a
the
clarifying
column,
question? Are you suggesting columns internal to the actual sky
supporting
bridge,
column,
or columns underneath the sky bridge?
column underneath.
Okay.
We're trying to eliminate column underneath it, so in glass, so that you have the sun coming through. You can make it a very nice feature with color panels, colored glass. So opening that up, and I didn't want to have, again, three-story height bridges coming through. You could make a mezzanine out of that. You could make a cafe, serving coffee there, and before you know it, it's a mezzanine, and then below you have the bridge going through. And so that's the reason why it's one level instead of 3. So limiting it to one level, no column, opening it up, glass, the sun is on the south side coming in, very nice.
Well, I guess, Ray, as the person that seconded, I would only vote for if it amended to just one level, because I would agree with Richard about, I wouldn't want to limit the architect on columns if there could be something done there, and I think we've addressed the clarity in the report. That I would vote for the one level only, but I wouldn't vote for all three factors.
I would also, I agree with that. I don't want to limit the architectural possibilities of this, but this gets into the trust but verify. I mean, we're at this stage, we're not going to, the DC is not going to see what the actual proposal looks like,
No, you
architectural
would.
design.
You would.
But at what point?
When they are ready to make an actual land use permit submittal for a building of at least 150,000
Right,
square feet.
Right,
If it was shown on the land plan, so buildings 4A, 4B, 5, or 6,
which are?
when they make their full site development permit submittal, it will come to you.
Okay.
Right.
Well,
Right. And that's fine, that's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I agree that I don't want, personally, I don't want to address the columns issue. And even on the one level, I think it should be one level, or one, not connect more than one level of one building to another, but I have a little bit of a reservation about trying to get into how high or whether it can have a clear story on it or not. So I'm not real comfortable at this point in the game dictating architectural requirements to the company.
So the language then might be that it connects the same level between,
Two buildings.
right,
And I'll amend my motion to delete the open span then. So it would read, if the applicants decide to install a sky bridge, it shall be of one level.
So my only concern about saying it shall be one level is that if you wanted to add that Clara story that some of the members seemed interested in, that might not be the interpretation in implementing that.
Okay, well, one story would be one story. Clear story is, this is
Okay.
clear story.
So
This room is a one-story room with clear story.
so
story.
what you're asking is if the applicant decides to install a sky bridge, it may be one story in height?
Yeah, one story in height, yeah.
I thought what he was saying is it's going to connect the same level building to building. So if you're connecting the second floor on one building, you connect the second floor on another building.
So just so you know that currently the sky bridge criteria does not allow significant grade
Right.
but across, so you would not be able, I mean, unless this building was significantly lower, it would have to connect level 2 to level 2.
And nor do, as I understand it, nor does it allow for angles to be in, for it to start lower and have an arch or anything like that in it. It has to, from what I understand about it, it has to be level.
I'm not sure I would interpret that it couldn't have an arch, Randy, but I would agree that connecting level 2 to level 3 would not be possible.
Okay, so let's, Ray, so what we want here, or what I think you're saying is you want to make sure that we don't have multiple level sky bridges. So we're talking about connecting one floor of one building to another floor of another building.
Well, maybe what you want to say is what you don't want, is that you don't
Well,
want multi-level sky bridges.
Again, how's that?
That's fine.
Okay.
No multi-level clear story, yeah.
There we go. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
You agree with
So
the
we
change?
need, is that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we.
I agree with the change as
All
the
right.
second.
So we have a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? as drafted?
Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimously. All right. Okay. So, are there any further,
Are there any of
Any of
What-
the, on your list of stuff that we want
list of 8 that you wanted to consider, Mr. Chair?
to, or is that
no,
separate?
no, I thought the list of 8 were going to be recommendation, or just kind of recommendations. We've asked the council to look
Unless there are
at.
any that you wanted to add a condition for.
Yeah.
And
What-
that's
what
true.
do you
You
have?
could make it could be part of your recommendation. Conditions probably, these conditions really relate to the land plan.
Right.
So if you had if you wanted to give them additional information, perspective, opinion, recommendations on the development agreement, that would probably be a recommendation.
Okay. So they,
So we covered Commissioner Morgan, Southern Vista one. I had that as one of my 8. So if you cross that one off, the others, I think, are more development agreement oriented.
Mike,
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 Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So, so of the 8, one of them was already addressed by Commissioner Morgan. So the Southern Vista, the rest are were, I think, bigger development commission or development agreement conditions or recommendations, and not necessarily tied to the land plan.
okay. So are there any further,
is this a development agreement we're approving?
Yes, this is the
this
development
is
agreement.
the DA, right?
This is the
We've already,
development agreement.
we've already
You've done the MSPA.
done the MSPA, right?
So if you wanted to add content to the recommendation, probably the place would be to put it down in that motion, that the memo of recommendation would include,
The following points.
yeah.
Yeah.
If,
Gotcha, yeah.
does that make sense?
Here's what we're really thinking.
Okay. So, again, are there any further amendments or conditions that the commission wants to consider with regard to the DA? Okay.
No. Okay.
Do I have a motion?
No, we've got a motion. We have a motion
Right.
on the floor. It was amended. Now we're back
Right.
to the main motion.
Right.
As amended.
Okay.
Second.
So,
It's already been,
Oh.
well, it's already been moved and seconded.
so we're into discussion of
On
it
the
now.
main, back to the
Right.
main motion.
So there being no further amendments or conditions suggested by the commission, and there being a first and a second motion, we are now ready to vote. All those in favor of the development agreement as worded with the appropriate wording for the conditions desired by the commission signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I move we prepare a draft motion for preparation of Mr. Chair, I move the staff prepare a memo of recommendation as shown.
Second?
Second.
Discussion?
Now we talk about the things you might want to add.
Yes.
Right. So can we put the list up so we can remind ourselves of what we thought was
Now,
important?
what we're doing here these are things that we want to call to the attention of the city council and say, by the way, we think you also ought to really look at the following issues, which we believe are related to this generally, but not specifically. So we'd like you to give serious consideration to these points going forward. Okay?
Last sentence, in addition to the following points.
I didn't do that. I wouldn't have, I know you were still reading.
No, that's all right. I can't find the on switch on my computer, so that's that. I did that.
Okay, so the first one, let me know if you can't hear me. The first one you may or may not still want to keep as a bigger topic, but this was what Commissioner Leong brought up, and you guys worked through an amended condition, but whether or not you want a bigger, more overarching recommendation related to consideration of sky bridges and views, That would be number one. Number two, clarify the limitations to the CC&Rs and the PPOA for Pickering. That came up. Number three, I think this was from Commissioner Brennan, was, talk about CIP, Central Issaquah Plan, and the Costco kind of development agreement, and, thinking about the bigger picture and how those two pieces relate. And I think specifically, since there's no residential in Costco, and I'm kind of adding my own lens, does this mean that the city should be thinking maybe a little bit differently about the rest of Pickering and the redevelopment of that neighborhood and the inclusion of housing, and should that be a conversation that somebody should have at this point? Number four.
And also, the other point was the kind of integration of this development into the trail system and the enhancement of that trail system to.
Absolutely. Okay, yes. MTFA, the funding risk, that was clearly something that the commission had some concerns over. The role of DC, I put trust and verify with question mark. I think the issue that was brought up by the commission is the evolving or de-evolving role of the commission and the importance of that. And I think, putting forward that message to the council is important.
And Keith, I would suggest again, the issue to me for the council to consider is, do they continue to want the information that traditionally the council or the commission, the development commission, provides, or not?
So, as a point of clarification, with a site development permit, the commission is the decision maker, and that there is no recommendation or additional action at the council. Right. Okay.
So can I narrow this one down even a little bit more? And it really is about the role, because these permits site development permits don't go back to council, so they are either at staff level or commission, depends on, mostly the threshold is 150,000 square feet. So the question is whether we want to exempt or we want to change the process within the development agreement for Costco projects that are in excess of 150,000 square feet and remove the decision-making role of the development commission. That's
Could I
the
make
issue.
one point of clarification?
Mm-hmm.
That's only for the 4 buildings that are shown on the land plan. Any other buildings that are not shown on the land plan would go through the standard process.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, number 6 is parking, and I think, the parking issue was brought up. And then will be now 7 is the speed of the process, and, that was a concern for the commission.
I think that gets cranked in with the MTF funding risk. I
can definitely link those two.
Yeah. All right. So my feeling on this, frankly, and I'll go first, is that I personally don't believe we need to address sky bridges and views.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, Keith, you can scratch through that. I think that my personal opinion is 2, we should ask them to think about clarification there. I'm not sure what the wording would be at this juncture, but to me, 2 and 3, and then the speed of the process in the MTFA. Yeah, and I think that's right. I think parking is also something that, that issue comes up with everything that we do. So I'm looking at things that are different than what we always look at, and areas that we always recommend that are unique to this DA. Okay, that's kind of what I'm looking at here. So the clarification, CIP and Costco, think about the big picture, absolutely, in my opinion. The speed of the process driven by the MTFA and the concurrent funding risk, if it isn't moved that, and what are the ramifications of that? And then the role of the DC going forward.
So parking comes off. Am I here? Is there a consensus?
Yeah. Okay. All right.
With 5 things.
Okay.
And in my mind, the CCRs of PPOA still, in my mind, become a private issue, but it becomes important to the extent that the CCNRs may limit residential development, which I hadn't heard before tonight. And so I think the city really would like to have some residential development take place within Pickering Place. I would hate to see the CCNRs or PPOA
Prevent that.
from
Yeah.
happening.
So just on that, I agree with that, and just on that point, the CCNR is essentially, well, the master plan for Pickering Place actually doesn't allow for development consistent with the central Issaquah plan.
Right.
And so the idea here is, in my mind, is how do we encourage those properties to move forward into the kind of the current plan? And that's a strategy the council should think about.
And I think we can add that because that's a great policy direction for the council to understand. Because you guys, I mean, if you remember, the first time we talked about this, there was some serious kind of recoiling about, well, I don't know about removing the MSP from Pickering, and that might be a big problem. And kind of we worked through that, and as you guys learn more about what that meant and how it limits development and really enactment of the vision for the CIP, I think you guys came to the conclusion, yes, that's 27 years old, it's from a past time, we need to get rid of it, and if we can encourage other property owners within Pickering to also be removed from that master site plan, that would be good for the council as well. That's the message I heard. If you guys want to add that in here, I think that would be a great message to send forward to the council.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's I mean, that's why we have this meeting, is to address the limitations on a member of that organization to do what they want to do. And this is to try to address it from the consideration of the city, the plan, and the parties involved. Okay.
And I think we should also include in the memo that this was really a lot of hard work by the commission, and that we would like them to double our salaries.
We support that.
And an annual vote.
0 times 2 is what?
Do you think the 51 million would cover that?
All right.
One other thing, just a thought, role of the DC. Again, I think we're here because of the council and the mayor, but I think I would not have, if this had been a new entity coming into town saying we want the ability to do this, unproven, I wouldn't have voted to approve the idea of buildings over 150,000 going to staff with only community conference. But I think Costco's proven over the years to be a good developer, good steward of property within the city. I think they've shown they can provide something that we'd all like. So.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Morgan on that. I think what I would like to see is that we get across to the we don't think I mean, it's a precedent, obviously. Obviously, it's a precedent, but I'd be real careful about giving the impression that this can be followed by somebody that doesn't have a track record, a demonstrated track record that we can look at and mitigate to a significant degree our discomfort with approving things that normally we would have to see first.
So I'm having to write interpretations for all of this, so I love this conversation. I think two things. I think that's a great piece, and I don't know if that's in there, so I'll go back and look at that. I think the other piece is that we've spent a lot of time on the land plan as part of this, and that we have these existing buildings that create this sort of style manual, this level of expectation, that we're not just looking at. I mean, the land plan without the existing campus, I think, would not be reviewable.
Right.
Well, and I heard the word trust out of at least 4 of you. So I think, clearly whatever words Lucy and I picked to, immortalize this or memorialize this, trust will definitely be listed in there. Trust and Costco as a long-term, city employer will be part of that discussion so that it's clear.
Procedural question, Keith. When does the commission get to see the draft wording of these?
Well, so that's up to you. Right now, the way the motion is drafted, it would be up to you.
Yes.
Now, the commission can decide how they want that memo to be prepared.
Are you going to be in the country anytime soon?
Yes.
The next?
Unless my bail bondsman fails me. Yeah. All right. So what I don't want to do, I mean, obviously, we've spent enough time on this to signify that it's important to us, but I don't want to get into an unnecessary delay, of the process. I mean, I don't think this is.
I'm comfortable with your
Review.
reviewing it, yeah.
Well, I think.
We'll double yours.
Triple his
Yeah,
salary.
triple salary.
right.
You know, you also have the option of emailing it out to
Oh,
other
yeah,
commissioners if you feel that you need additional eyes on it.
All right, so I'm sorry, it's late for all of us. So we can vote on the DA
We did.
and not have to hold anything up with regard to these conditions. So the DAs, we voted on it. Now we're asking the staff to draft these conditions.
Well,
and
these points of information.
Points of
Right.
information, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
they're not conditions. They're points of information which will be forwarded to the council from the commission. And when I get that, I'll forward it to you, say, here are the drafts I made, let me know in, 48 hours?
We did 2 other meetings worth of work, don't we? Isn't he
Right.
catching up still? Like,
So just so you know, the commitment I made, in terms that affect you guys, because I commit you guys to do all sorts of stuff. So the commitment I made was I want to get your recommendation out to the public by no later than Wednesday of next week.
Oh,
So that, if you guys wanted, if you guys even want to keep it over the weekend, I'm good with all that. But by Wednesday of next week, I'd like to get it out to the public so the council can look at it and start to chew on it and have some time to think about it.
okay. To work? Okay,
That's good.
all right.
and Lucy, I guess just one question. The question about the trail that I think Commissioner Brennan brought up, would that also include the trail connection within Lake Sammamish State Park that was brought up in the letter from Mr. Kapler? Or hopefully that will include reference to that too, so,
Yeah.
thank you.
That does. What I was thinking.
Is, in your opinion, as city staff, it would be redundant for us for the DC to, as one of these recommendations or points of interest, to identify the fact that the two projects that have come up since the CIP was put in place do not on the surface appear to be in the spirit, as in residential, retail, office space together, but that this is, in my opinion, this is the way it's going to roll out. I mean, the fact that there's no residential in Atlas and this is, the plan calls for it as highly desirable but not required. And if they are concerned about the direction that it seems to be going, then they might want to think about it. Okay?
And
I
Mr.
think
Chair,
we can add-
we still need to vote on the
Oh, yeah,
last.
we do.
Okay,
Okay,
sorry.
so,
Oh, sorry, I didn't,
yes.
oh, no, I went to.
PC.
So we have a motion, we have a second, and
So,
I'm sorry.
so I took the bottom motion and I did the edits that we did for the MSPA, but then I added sort of consolidating the points as I heard them. This is not the way they will appear in the memo.
Okay.
We will unpack these based on your discussion between the minutes and the videotape, but just to capture that these are the 4 topics with which you want expanded within the recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so again, we have a motion, we have a second, we have a discussion. Is there any further discussion? And then,
I was just kind of caught off guard when you said Atlas didn't have any residential.
I stand corrected. I meant retail.
Those R words get me every time.
I lived in the back of the
You weren't
grocery
caught off
store,
guard.
so-
You got it.
All right, so, yeah, all right, so again, we have a first and a second, we have discussion, is there any further discussion? All right, we'll then go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as drafted, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, there ain't none, unanimous, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Let's go home. Is there any further business? And then, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
All right. Good work, guys. Good job. Hey, seriously.
We're getting time and a half after 10:05.
No kidding.